Semester 3, determinations gone astray, but they are not gone. We come back to the formula. Expectation is a matter of feeling. Feeling is a servant of the will. The will is the result of a wish, and a wish is spun from the power of spirit. Just how this works, or by what kind of a psychological test this can be measured, he do not know. My father never told me. In fact, the only thing he ever said was, "All I expect of you is that you do something worthwhile with your life." Semester 4, we first make our habits, and then our habits make us. John Dryden, how much of your talent is being wasted for want of a little boldness? Doctors, Tom Russ Crandy read, Lesson 16, How to Win the Courage to Take Risks. Now you're ready to move forward. Now you know that it's your choice, and yours alone, as to what you will do with the rest of your life. Perhaps you have even been convinced, after 3 very personal semesters, that whatever you think you will eventually become. And you do have all that potential, don't you? So now what's holding you back? Afraid to take a chance? Have you ever heard of the Jonah complex? You probably have it if you're living in your own little comfort zone, performing unchallenging tasks where no one will ever hassle you, taking no risks, facing few problems, never concerned about growth or testing your potential. This is living. Hopefully, it's hurting you deep down inside. Why? People don't change when they feel good. They change when they're fed up. When things are going all right, we all tend to do pretty much what we've been doing. Pain pushes us to those crucial turning point. We hurt, then finally choose. It's that adverb, finally, enough is an owl. Those are the conclusions of 2 young and distinguished West Coast doctors, Tom Rusk and Randy Redd, whose long list of credentials includes their positions as adjunct professors of psychology and law, respectively, at the University of San Diego. This lesson, from their bold and honest book, I Want to Change But I Don't Know How, may be just the medicine you need to cure you of ever hiding in your comfort zone again. 159.16. Semester 4. All too often we humans indulge in the cowardice of being too careful, selling out for a promise of security. And we get cheated. You've seen it. The futility of using one's job as a way to hide. I am a lawyer, doctor, manager, and so forth, as if to say I am a lawyer and nothing else. Or the futility of seeking meaning through a spouse's accomplishments, doctor's wife's syndrome seen, also in the spouses of politicians, business executives, ministers, lawyers, entertainers. Indeed, in any wife or husband who avoids challenges beyond the daily routine, or who believes that vicariously enjoying a spouse's success is enough to make their life more meaningful. Pathetic. It's futile to live for some future time when things will be different, believing that as soon as I'm older, richer, more educated, or in a more sophisticated vein when I finish my therapy, then all will be well. Dream on, for these are but futile delusions. And it's futile to live in some past phase of your life when I was younger, stronger, my spouse was living, or before my marriage, my divorce, my surgery, my heart attack, I lost my job, the children were born. More hopeless deadens. Charles Dickens depicts the tragic figure of Lady Havisham, sitting in her bedroom in full bridal regalia decades after her rejection by the woodable groom. Her monumental cowardice keeps her afraid to face her life as it is. If we want, we too can have dreams and cobwebs, fantasies about what was or might be. Thomas Wolfe made the same point in You Can't Go Home Again. An old vaudeville joke says the same thing in yet another way. Your money or your life, demands the robber. Take my life, in saving my money from my old age, the overcourteous hero replies. Incredibly, many people continue their old lifestyles, their habits, even if they feel miserable, lonely, bored, inadequate, or abused. Why? Of course, because habit is an easy place to hide. How many women marry several alcoholics sequentially, insisting they never suspected? A man spends his whole life working 6 to 1 hours a week, trying to get rich. Why? Because he watched his father slave his life away, never enjoying himself, dying while working arid. He doesn't want this to happen to him. Lesson 16. 161. Others attempt to live cautiously in the safety of established patterns. They do not feel fulfilled, yet they have found a formula, not of success, whatever that is, but of avoiding failure. This is the living death. When security becomes the overwhelming consideration, man does not live by security alone. And of course, neither does woman. Life has inevitable risk. Each next breath is a chance. Heart attacks, auto accidents, tax assessment, business problem area, conceivable kind of bad news waits to spring upon us without warning. So it's hard for us humans to play the gamble of life. It's a difficult balance. At times we might put too much on the next spin of the wheel, and at other times we feel so hurt and cheated that we want to stop playing forever. But the goal, in a sense, is to find a style of playing the game of life that keeps our hand in without burning us out. When we reach beyond the safety and familiarity of our habits and behave in any way differently than our routines, we experience some tension. It may be mild, a slight tightness in the chest, or more pronounced, a rapid heart rate, nausea, diarrhea, fainting, or even panic. If we think about the possible consequences of a new change too long, the rats of fear come out of our mental basements and may overwhelm us. Anything new can be scary. The risk-taking in life is very much like investing money. Potential returns reflect in part the degree of risk. The higher the stakes, the more frightening the game. And the clock keeps on ticking. Time accelerates with age. Of course, nothing can be done about that. Yet, 2 minutes in a roller coaster is far more intense than 8 hours of boring meetings. Variety prolongs time. Change wakes us up. Share time with different people in different places, doing different things, and we can experience a week in just one day. Times of high emotional intensity, as in passionate lovemaking, can last far longer and fulfill far more than the same physical acts without the passion. Perceived time is an elastic commodity that depends on our age uncontrollable, and on how we consume it controllable. The intensity dial is in our grasp. We are given time. How much we make of it is up to us. Human beings do need some stress. We were designed by evolution to survive in the stress of food chain competition. A certain amount of pressure is necessary for our health. Of course, too much stress, like too much sound, is bad. But no stress, like total silence, makes us imbalanced. Many people try to insure themselves against every possible 162. Semester 4, danger. They want to never hurt, never be scared, never be lonely. So they adopt a formula of life where they live for material goods, feel as little as possible, and hide behind old habits. Yet that hunger for natural stresses remains. Gradually they fill the gap with internally manufactured stressor wars and fears. Of course they don't say to themselves, I'm going to adopt a lifestyle which will minimize my chance skating, even though I'm aware it will give me an empty and boring life. They just grow up that way. But you can say to yourself how much chance skating is right for me. What kinds of stresses will help me on my path? Some may find physical stress helpful, stores, exercise, or even fasting. For others, the answer may be skydiving, motorcycle racing, or passionate interpersonal relationships. For still others, it will be retreat to a monastery and a courageous journey through the turbulence within. Each of us has a job in life to fulfill our own needs, find what stresses and risks fit us best. Boredom is the legacy of fear. Risk-taking is a major part of the cure, so don't hope that somehow you'll be able to avoid it. Chronic capitulation to fear only ensures mediocrity. The lifestyle we are advocating is one where you ask yourself for each new thing you try, what's the risk and what's the possible payoff. It's an attitude where you expect chance skating to be part of what you are doing on this planet. Not necessarily crazy risk. If we get too extreme in our chance skating, we don't hang around long enough to learn anything new. But careful, measured increases in risk seem to be the best way to go. For example, when you're learning how to ride a bicycle, you wouldn't start out in heavy automobile traffic. Instead, you'd pick a street where if you do fall down, at least you won't get run over. So explore and experiment. Look for that balance between taking suicidal chances on one hand and running from risking on the other. Some days will feel right for risks, others will feel better if you play it safe. Experiment to find out what's best for that moment. Since anything new will always be stressful, judge yourself by your efforts. No matter what you try, there's somebody else who probably does it better. The point is to find those things that let you feel exhilarated and alive. The point is to learn to season life's banquet with those redolent spices of stress and risk. Lesson 16. 163. Courage as losing yourself. Perhaps the ultimate experiences in any life are those that transcend day-to-day existence. The sweet, rare times when involvement in an activity leads to a fulfillment beyond our wildest dreams. People in the arts and the devoutly religious base there lives on this high, but anybody can get it. You can have it with someone you love or even someone you hate. It can come from cooking or woodworking or just walking. It's an experience that's like being lifted up, swept away, forgetting worries and self-consensus. It's been called merging, flowing, sought-ori, and countless other names. Like love, however, it's one of those things that if never experienced is hard to believe. Any human endeavor from checking out groceries to tuning an engine can be performed in this creative state or reduced to a perfunctory routine. One of the things we've often seen are people sitting around, waiting for it to happen, as though they'll suddenly get some kind of badge of membership they can show to other people, as if to say, see, I've got it too. But, like anything else done, primarily for the benefit of the audience, it's a performance that's bound to flop. If you are standing on a hilltop looking out over the countryside and suddenly have that experience of flowing and being part of it all, but then try to condense that experience into a tourist snapshot for the folks back home, you'll lose it in an instant. It can't be canned. You can experience it, but you can't sell it. And in a sense, that's the greatest risk of all. You can't possess it. You can't prove it. You can only be it. You can let yourself go in what you do, or you can hold back. You can strive to immerse yourself, to take that risk of losing your identity in what you are doing. Or you can stiffy straighten your life to keep it at a safe distance. You can try to reduce everything into explainable experiences. You can label and classify all that you see in a desperate attempt to stay in control. Or you can stop strutting and fretting and let go. Fundamental to this process is the issue of losing control. There is a paradox in it that goes something like this: the highest form of control is when one surrenders all control. It's like you never really own anything unless you can give it away. When we're trying to learn something, if we struggle to stay in control, we learn slowly, if at all. When we're learning to ride a bicycle, if we keep struggling for control, stiffly directing our arms and legs with commandments on how to behave, well, fall down more. 164. Semester 4, frequently. Instead, we can surrender our myth of being in charge, surrender our identity, and become part of the bicycle. We learn best by losing ourselves. If we can be strong enough to just forget about who we are for a moment instead of taking ourselves so damn seriously, if we forget about what we think, what we believe, what we want to the risk of forgetting ourselves learn with the grace of a blossoming flower. It takes the highest courage to use this self-surrender in any activity we undertake, but the rewards are equally high. We gain a peace, that sense of rightness, and most importantly, our full powers to create and grow. This is the advanced course of acting as if, instead of pretending that one can ride a bicycle, one gives oneself to the act. Rather than trying, one just lets go. Most teaching presupposes that technical mastery is not the means but the end. But technical skill has no life of its own. It merely makes us free to surrender completely. Unless you have this experience of letting go, unless there is some area in your life where you have struggled through the technical mastery enough to give you that ability to flow, you'll never believe that such things happen. If you want to play handball, for example, there are some technical skills that are useful to learn. But ultimately your game is the creative way in which you string together these basic elements. If you see them only as separate and isolated elements, you'll never have an exciting game. You'll just be another robot trying to imitate somebody less. What kind of life do you want? How courageous will you be? The choice is yours. Creativity is a fascinating topic. Throughout recorded history, people have studied the very creative to find out their secrets. These gifted people themselves have at times reflected upon their own experiences and attempted to find some sort of formula. But there is none. Creativity isn't a step-by-step process. More than any other group in present-day American society, athletes seem to be conscious of how creativity is learned. Concentration is the phrase most often used to describe that state, which is the essential prerequisite for peak performance. A good game can often be differentiated from a bad game by the degree of consternation. And what this state of concentration seems to be is a suspension of doubt and self-consensus, a way of clearing the mind of all the distracting rubble and trash. Some Oriental philosophies have made this state of mind their primary focus. Indeed, the concept of acting without self, Lesson 16, 165, conscious thought was probably first crystallized by the samurai swordsmen of medieval Japan. Using some of the philosophical concepts of their time, they determined that the best way to beat one's adversary in a duel was to fight without the delay of thinking. Polished technical skill was a prerequisite, but the actual moves, were dictated by feeling rather than thought. By refining their intuitive sense through the constant discipline of practice duels, they were able to develop a state of mind that minimized the clutter of such thoughts as, oh, no, is he going to try to attack me from the left or the right? Instead, poised and balanced, the samurai could respond as if he were at one with his opponent, as if he knew each moment what would happen next. The body learns instead of the mind. In other words, when you are learning something, it's worth it to turn off, unplug, or tune out the mind for a little while. You can't tell the mind to shut up, because then it just talks back to you, but you can quietly note what it's telling you, then switch to another channel for a while. Like the samurais and archers of the Orient gained their discipline, not by focusing on the target, but by striving for the feeling of rightness in the shot. If the shot was right, hitting the target comes naturally. Bullseyes on tiny targets in darkened rooms are part of what Zen archers do, but not for the sake of hitting targets. Their purpose is a form of meditation, a quest for that feeling of rightness. So if you want to learn something new, concentrate on getting that right feeling that is true to yourself. Take the risk of letting go the precious little control you've struggled to gain, letting go enough to immerse yourself in what you are doing. Then do it. Sure, natural or genetic endowment, study and practice, and even luck all play important parts in creativity, but ultimately what is necessary is this giving of oneself over to what one does. We like to think of it as a sort of tapas process. First, you immerse yourself in your creative action, let go and do it. Second, critically review. You mentally stand back a little, take a little distance and weigh the results. Did it get me closer to where I want to be? Like a painter before the canvas, first there is the brush stroke that occurs in this trance-like state, and then a step back to gain a new perspective and gaze upon the outcome. These two phases flow into each other, but in a sense represent separate states of mandrikative action and critical reviewing. Now, the point of all this is that many people become preoccupied with achieving a particular result, such as fame, fortune, 166. Semester 4, approval from others, or even something as evanescent as happiness. But if you get locked into outcomes, you'll never be able to let yourself go long enough to experience intensely. After you give it a good try, then think and review. But don't try to review while you're trying to create. Edit after you invent. If your awareness is focused on the outcome, you can't allow yourself to let go. Ultimately, it comes down to what kind of value system you want. All that counts is winning, or to try is to succeed. The creative state requires forgetting about winning and focusing on trying. Anyway, playing just to win is a dead end. In the big scheme of existence, what game ever matters all that much? What could ever be worth the brutal cutthroat craziness of forcing ourselves to play only to win? All we humans really want is to feel good, to feel right, to find peace. We just get tricked by our myth that winning brings all those things automatically. One of the most common reasons why people don't take control of themselves and don't accept responsibility for everything they do is fear of failure, fear of being a loser. Only by giving yourself credit for every effort can you ever find the courage to immerse yourself in creative action. If we live by the principle that to try is to succeed, that to give our best effort is what it's all about, we gain a mastery and peace. With that attitude, we slip more easily into cycles of creating and reviewing. Good results are only a fringe benefit which may come and go, but what we do with ourselves is always in our control. A farmer for 15 years has managed to produce a good living for himself and his family. He never asked for a handout or special treatment. To him, welfare is an obscenity. Independence, hard work as ye sow, so shall ye reap are his guiding principles. One year, despite his fine efforts, a freak storm wipes out his entire crop. His reserves are inadequate to meet his financial obligations. Reluctantly, he goes on welfare and accepts disaster aid. Both are handouts. He feels a failure. Do you agree? We hope not. If you agree, then we understand why you fear change, risk, and experimentation. Fear of failure must paralyze you. Letting your self-respect depend on results makes you a slave to every whim of chance. Break free. If you're going to love yourself no matter what. Actually, what we are saying is not all that new. It's not whether you win, it's how you play the game. But that noble tradition has been dying a slow death. Coach Vince Lombardi often said winning isn't everything, but trying to is. Yet didn't you think he said winning is everything? Lesson 16, 167. This common misquote shows a tragic truth about our social values. Lombardi was a great teacher and leader, but once again, people hear what they want to hear. Be a strong coach for yourself. Encourage your own efforts. If you set a goal, but don't reach it, you have a choice. You could put yourself down. I knew one couldn't. Maybe some people can change, but one can't. My childhood screwed me up so bad, one just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. He'll never get it together. Or you can cheer yourself on. I tried magnificently. I'm proud of me. I was truly immersed in the effort. One failed in my attempt, one accept that I accept the pain. But one remain proud and love myself for my courage. What is success? Who measures your value, you or your audience? Whom are you trying to impress? Your parents, living or dead, your spouse, your neighbors, or that mythical vague, they out there you learn to dress up for on Sundays and holidays so as not to embarrass your family. The myth, the cruel hoax perpetrated by our schools, by the media, by our churches or synagogues, suggests success as a place, a status, a thing, a level to be attained. Choose a career, work at it, until you achieve success. Then others will respect you and you will be happy. Ridiculous. Few experiences are more resonantly hollow than to be hailed as successful, only to feel undeserving of the admiring horde. You need only look at the catalogue of superstar entertainers whose lives prematurely ended in an agony of self-destruction. You play first, last, and ultimately to an audience of one. Disappoint that one and you are bankrupt. Cowardice stems from clutching desperately for a success we feel we don't deserve. Learn to lose yourself in your efforts. Learn to let go and you will have gained true courage. Have the guts to face the light. Strive for as much courage as you can. That doesn't mean work yourself to the bone. Play is a vital need to. But don't wait for neat formulas, guaranteed tricks, to solve your problems. Have the courage to live a life where some days will be hard and some easy, no matter how clever you are. Let go with love and energy will fill you. Success is courageously living each moment as fully as possible. Success means the courage to flow, struggle, change, grow, and all the other contradictions of the human condition. Success means being true to you. The biggest difference between a wisher and a doer is motivation. Charles Tremendous Jones, Lesson 17, How to Become a Self-Motivator. Let's imagine that you have come to this classroom early. You need some time alone to reflect on what you have just learned about values and courage and being true to yourself. A huge bear of a man walks into the room, glances up at the blackboard and prints, in large white letters, Charles Tremendous Jones. Is this your next professor? Do professors have names like that? Well, this one does, and his powerful lectures and seminars, delivered before more enthusiastic audiences than he cares to remember, have motivated thousands to become positive and more productive individuals. He turns and notices you sitting here alone. He smiles, walks down to your desk, and extends his hand, introducing himself in a hoarse voice. If you were an old friend, he would be shaking your hand but giving you a bone-crushing hug instead. How are you doing? He asks. I'm catching on, you reply. He nods and smiles. Do me and yourself a favor during this lesson. If you are to profit as others have, don't remember what I say here. The value of this lecture, from my book, Life is Tremendous, is for you to remember what you think as a result of what I say. My number one objective is to stir up your thought processes and help you frame your own best thoughts with words so that you can harness and use them. Is that a deal? You nod. He returns to the blackboard, faces you again, and shouts, and please don't take things so seriously. Success can be 169-17. Semester 4. Fun I life can the funnel you is tremendous, or maybe, if I'm lucky, it even have you smiling once or twice. Today we're surrounded by motive principals and things strive to motivate people to buy a product, pay for advice, or enlist in a cause. Motivation classes are crammed and motivation books are bestsellers. Motivation is big business. But look closely at these motive artists to reach the point where they can motivate anybody into doing anything, and success is running out their ears, yet they are miserable because they forgot to learn how to motivate themselves. Which would you rather be, miserable, successful motivator, or a happy, motivated flop? One would rather be a happy, motivated flop. H1 am learning to be motivated. You'll eventually become a successful motivator of others and be happy doing it. The motivator who can motivate everybody but himself may win the world, but he'll never enjoy it. How well one remember my great desire as a young salesman to become a master motivator. One couldn't wait to finish my training, so one could use my dynamic motivational skills. The sales presentations were powerful. In fact, they were so powerful that one felt one had to temper them or the prospect might die of a heart attack before one asked him to buy. One knew no one could resist the logic, the benefits, the security, the peace of mind. There hardly seemed a problem in the world that my presentation couldn't solve. One recall how one expected the prospect to snatch the pen from my hand to sign on the dotted line. But he never did. Right in the hottest part of the sizzle, my prospect would yawn or interrupt with some scintillating statement like "I'm in Cernisburn," or "I have $5,000 with double identity." My heart would hit the floor. It'd sink so low it'd have to reach up to touch bottom. You never saw a more discouraged young salesman than one was. One soon began to be learning my problem wasn't how to motivate people. My problem was how to keep them from demotivating me. Sometimes one would become so discouraged there was nothing to do but go cry on the boss' shoulder, only to find he was more discouraged than one was. The prospects were discouraging me, the boss was discouraging me, friends were discouraging me, and one thought at times even my wife was discouraging me. Lesson 17, 171. Sometimes a fellow at a seminar will come up and murmur, "Do you know why I'm not a success? I have a miserable wife." I enjoy giving these fellows the shock treatment. Do you really have a miserable wife? Well, you don't know how lucky you are. The best asset a man can have is a miserable wife. What if my wife had been sympathetic when I went home and told her how miserable things were, and she said, "Oh, my sweet little daddy, you stay home here with mommy and I'll take care of you." We would have consoled each other among our furniture on the sidewalk. If you have a miserable wife, you'll keep working or she'll remind you what an idiot you were to take such a job in the first place. But don't despair if you don't have a miserable wife. You can probably make the grade without this asset. I'm kidding, but I want to make it clear that there are no barriers you can't overcome if you are learning to be motivated. I believe with all my heart that everything that touches your life is to make you a more deeply motivated person. No income can motivate others to higher goals. Some people ask, what is my secret of being motivated? Well, I didn't find it, it found me. One of my achievements during my first 5 years in selling was 5 years of consecutive weekly production. This means that I never missed 1 week in selling a policy. This sounds impressive, but it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I believed in goals, and so I made a vow that I would sell a policy every week or buy one. Let me tell you, after I bought 20 policies, I began to get motivated. Little did I realize that a simple vow would have the greatest influence on my work the rest of my life. For out of that vow and what it cost me to keep it, I began to learn involvement and commitment. Some people get involved with their work but are not committed. Others are committed but don't get deeply involved. The two go together, and I'm convinced that there is no way to learn to be a motivated person without being totally involved and committed to whatever you are engaged in. The greatest motivations I've had have come from my own heart and home. Someone else's experience or story can never motivate you as deeply as your own. I used to tell a prospect who said he was in Cernisburn that he was actually in Cernishan. But I discovered something far more effective through a little episode at home. This experience allowed me to agree wholeheartedly with an in Cernisburn prospect, but gave me additional motivation to pass on to him. Semester Factor 172. My son Jerry, 6 years old at the time, came in from the yard one day yelling at the top of his lungs for his mother. Naturally, this distracted me from my work in my office. Really, our living room had moved the furniture into the hallway. Jerry upped his yell several decibels, and I thought, I can't wait to get successful so I can move to a plush office downtown where I can fail in style. Finally, Jerry gave up, and just then Gloria came up from the basement where she had been running the washer. She said, "What did you want, Jerry?" He replied, "Nothing, just wanted to know where you were." I've told that story thousands of times because it shows why I pay the premiums on those 20 policies. I may never leave my 6 children an empire, a block of real estate, or a huge stock portfolio, but am going to leave them a priceless gift, a full-time mother. Because of my life insurance, all 6 could come yelling for their mother, knowing she was somewhere around the house, even though she didn't answer. Another time I was sitting in the rocker reading the paper when Eddie Rodgel Pam slipped her little blonde head under my arm and wiggled onto my lap. I kept reading, and then she said those few words that have helped me sell millions of dollars in life insurance. Looking at me with big, sad eyes, she said, "Daddy, if you won't ever leave me, I won't ever leave you." I didn't understand what prompted those words, but I immediately thought, well, dearest, I would never leave you, but if the Lord should rule otherwise, at least 111 never leave you without. Years ago, I learned there were two kinds of dads, the Itikavind and the Havakind. The Seekin says, I want my family to have everything I can give them as long as I'm here to see it. The Havakind says, I want them to have it whether I'm here to see it or not. That is what happened to me as a result of commitment and involvement. You say I'm not in the insurance field, or I don't have a selling career. Listen, the principles we are talking about are the same for a student, wife, office worker, salesman, or whatever you are. The great things in your life will be greater if you are capitalizing on them to help you be motivated. Remember, you are building a life, not an empire. One of my best friends got mixed up on this very thing and lost almost everything of value. I've heard men say, I put my business first, and other men say, I put my family first. A few say, I put my church or, lesson 17, 173, synagogue first. The truth is they probably put themselves first. But I've found that my best lessons for business come from my family and church. And the best lessons from my family come from my business and church. And the best lessons for church come from my family and business. Another son, Jeff, gave me some of the best motivation, training of my life. When he was 6, one asked Jeff what he wanted to do with his life. Now get this, 6 years old, and he still had no idea what he wanted to do with his life. When one was 6, one knew what one wanted to be. One day one wanted to be a fighter pilot. The next day one wanted to be a French foreign legionnaire. One wanted to be a boxer. One wanted to be a police officer. One always wanted to be something. Not my Jeff, still drifting. So one said, Jeff, we're going to have a little project. Here's a boy's life, you pick out a job. You're going to do something, partner. The next day, he had it all worked out. He was joining the Junior Executive Sales Club of America. He filled out the coupon and sent it in. One find that kids are dying to get on with the show. They want to do something. They're not getting much direction from any dobistific in the wrong way. 2 weeks later, when one came home, Jeff greeted me at the door. Look, Dad. And here was the biggest box of greeting cards I'd ever seen. One opened it up. There was a badge, credentials, and a notice that said, send in the money in 30 days. Jeff said, what do one do now? One said, well, you have to learn the sales talk first. Every night, one would come home and Jeff would say, well, Dad, am one ready? It'd say, have you got the sales talk down? He'd say, no. One said, you're not going out there dilbing if you're going to represent me. One want you to know what you are going to say. 2 weeks later, Jeff finally told me I don't like that sales talk. Well, write one yourself, I said. Next morning at the breakfast table, there was a little piece of paper that said, good morning, Mrs. Smith, I'm Jeffrey John Jones. One represent the Sales Club of America. That Sally 2 weeks had gone by, and in 2 more weeks one had to send in the money. That night, one came home, and one told Jeff, get out the tape recorder, we're going to make up a talk. We're going to work until you have a sales talk. We started rehearsing. The talk was like this. Good morning, Mrs. Smith, I'm Jeffrey John Jones of the Junior Executive, 174. Semester 4, Sales Club of America. Would you look at these greeting cards, please? You notice they carry the Good Housekeeping seal of approval and are an exceptionally good value at only $1.25 per box. Would you like 1 or 2 boxes? Smile, please. We rehearsed and rehearsed, and as we used the tape recorder to play back, one could see the tiger begin to develop in Jeff. Finally, he said, am one ready yet? One said, no, you're not ready yet. You know how it goes here, but you don't know how it is in the field. You go out into the hall, and it'll be your prospect. Take the boxes with you, knock on the door, and it'll show you what to expect when you get out in the field. Bursting with excitement and confidence, Jeff leapt into the hall to show me his power. He thought he was really ready. He knocked on the door. One threw open the door with a scowl and a roar. What do you mean busting in on my lunch? The junior executive salesman sank slowly to the floor in a state of shock. One got him up, and we started over. One let him get through the second line, and one shot him down the third line, and one shot him down. His mother downstairs thought one was killing her baby, but one was getting her baby ready for a little living. You know who's killing their baby today? The parent who is raising his kid to think the world is going to give him a hug and a kiss every time he turns around. One was getting this boy of mine ready for reality. Finally, Jeff had his talk down pat, and he made it through. Well, he said, are we ready? One said, you're ready. Here's how we start. Go down St. John's Road with 2 boxes. Wear a coat and a tie. As soon as you get 10 nos, make a beeline for the house. I knew that more than 10 nos would ruin him. And as soon as 2 people say yes, make a beeline for the house. I knew that more than 2 yeses might ruin him, to have seen prosperity kill about as many salesmen as failure has. He went out and sold those cards like hotcakes. Then one day he disobeyed me. On an unbelievably hot July day, Jeff came in after taking 19 straight nos. He was beaten, drenched with perspiration, and he slooped it on the sofa. He said, if they want any cards from me from now on, they'll have to come and get 'em. One said, now wait a minute, Jeff. You've just had a hard day, partner. Oh, Dad, he said, all the other kids have found out what I'm doing and they're selling cards too. One said, I know somebody out there wants to buy. Somebody had to be buying. One could never use that many greeting cards. One said, you need somebody to go along with you. You've, lesson 17. 175, got to get yourself a helper. Take your sister Candy along. Pay her 10 cents to carry the boxes, and she'll give you moral support. Did they get out there and encourage each other like I thought? No. They got out there and both started griping, and they both quit. That was a good reminder for me. If you get discouraged, don't cry on a friend's shoulder. A friend will give you sympathy, and you're already giving yourself twice as much sympathy as you need. You'd better get back into the swing of things and work all the harder. Now I had all these cards I my hands plus 2 quitters. I had to come up with something. Jeff, on Saturday I'm going out with you myself. Then I called up one of my assistants and said, Jack, on Saturday we're coming over to Green Lane Farms, and Jeff's in a slump. If I'll not get him out of this slump soon, I'll have to buy these cards myself. I'll let him out 2 houses from your house. I want him to get to Nos, and then have a yes waiting at your house. And so, we got over to Green Lane Farms on Saturday. The first house said yes instead of no, and the second house said yes. You should have seen Jeff's face as he ran back to the car with a 1,000% batting average. He was motivated. Last year, I lent Jeff $24 to finance a home cleaning product. He took 30 nos on a hot August day, but he didn't quit. He is learning that if you stay motivated, you don't mind the nos, and he knows there is a Greenell Enmerf experience ahead if you keep going. One of the greatest stories I've heard that shows the difference between outward and inward motivation is told by Bob Richards, the former Palouvel champion. A college boy on the football team was a number-one goof-off, a gold bricker. He liked to hear the cheers, but not to charge the line. He liked to wear the suit, but not to practice. He didn't like to put out. One day, the players were doing 50 laps and this showpiece was doing his usual 5. The coach came over and said, hey, kid, here's a telegram for you. The kid says, read it for me, coach. He was so lazy he didn't even like to read. Coach opened it up and read, dear son, your father's dead. Come home immediately. The coach swallowed hard. He said, take the rest of the week off. He didn't care if he took the rest of the year off. Well, funny thing, game time came on Friday, and here comes the team rushing out on the field, and one and behold, the last kid out was the goof-off. No sooner did the gun sound, 176. Semester 4, than the kid was saying, Coach, can I play today? Can I play? The coach thought, kid, you're not playing today. This is homecoming. This is the big game. We need every real guy we have, and you're not one of them. Every time the coach turned around, the kid badgered him, Coach, please let me play. Coach, I've got to play. The first quarter ended with the score lopsided against one alma mater. At halftime, the coach braced them in the locker room with a fight talk. All right, men, get out there and hit him. This is a long way from being over. Win this one for the old coacher wall. The team rushed out and began tripping over their own feet again. The coach, mumbling to himself, began writing out his resignation. And up came this kid. Coach, let me play. Please. The coach looked up at the scoreboard. All right, he said, get in there, kid. You can't hurt nothing now. No sooner did the kid hit the field than his team began to explode. He ran, passed, blocked, tackled like a star. The electricity leapt to the team. The score began to even up. In the closing seconds of the game, this kid intercepted a pass and ran all the way for the winning touchdown. Hulo, the stands broke loose. Pandemonium. People hoisted the hero onto their shoulders. Such cheering you never heard. Finally, the excitement subsided, and the coach got over to the kid and said, "I never saw anything like that. What in the world happened to you out there?" He said, "Coach, you know my dad died last week." "Yes," he said, "I read you the telegram." "Well, Coach," he said, "my dad was blind. And today was the first day he ever saw me play. Wouldn't it be great if life were a game? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the field of life had cheering sections on each side? And when we reached the impossible situation and didn't know how to go on, and no one understood us, and were about ready to fold and say those terrible words, 'I quit,' wouldn't it be wonderful if the stands would come alive and feed, yell, 'Charlie boy, keep on going, we're with you,' lid say, 'Woo-how, that's all I needed. Boy, it'd go down the field to another touchdown.' But life isn't a game, is it? It's a battlefield. Instead of players and spectators, we're all soldiers, including some gold brickers and some Wallace, but we're all in the struggle, whether we know it or not. And the person who knows how to be motivated doesn't need any cheering section. He has motivation built in. He's not looking for a crutch that might break, a bonus that will be taxed away. He's learning motivation from within. Without goals and plans to reach them, you are like a ship that has set sail with no destination. Dr. Fitzhugh Dodson, Lesson 18, How to Program Yourself for Success. Stand on any busy downtown street corner and spend 10 minutes watching humanity pass before you. How many out of each 100 would you guess have specific goals in their life, which they are pursuing with all their vigor? If you were a betting person, you could probably wager considerable sums of money that no knight of any 100 who passed ahead any goals that extended beyond that particular dale. Setting goals, you would learn from these individuals, if you had the courage to ask, is something that the company bosses do when they are planning next year's budget. Setting goals is what ball coaches and baseball managers often do. Setting goals is what presidents and governors and fundraisers always talk about, since they're involved with large operations. But how can we think about setting goals for ourselves when our paychecks aren't even large enough to cover our bills? Perhaps those paychecks are not large enough to pay their bills, and maybe never will be, because they have no goals, no concrete plans on how to improve their life, no ideas on how to raise their income, improve their talents, expand their knowledge, or increase their value to society. Regretfully, most of them are skippers of ships heading nowhere. Dr. Fitzhugh Dodson became intimately known through his two classics on child raising, How to Parent and How to Father. Unlike many goal-setting systems, which can be complicated, he, from his book, The You That Could Be, shares with you a simple 178 Semester 4 and common sense plan for fulfillment that can help you to begin planning the life you deserve. I yourself want to talk about your goals and plans and how you can program for success. Your potential self thrives on well-made goals that reflect what is important to you. A goal is an objective you want to achieve. A plan is a specific way of reaching that goal. Both goals and plans are ideas in your mind. Look around you. Everything you see in the world around you, unless it is a part of nature, began as an idea in somebody's mind. The suit or dress you are wearing, the car you drive, the music you listen to, the words you are reading began as an idea in my mind. Then the idea became a goal, and I created a plan to achieve it. The typewriter I wrote it on was originally the idea of an IT venture Englishman named Henry Mill. It has been continuously developed and refined by a series of other people since, and represents an achieved goal for each of them. Everything you wear, everything in your house or apartment, even the building itself, had to be thought of before it could exist. And then the design, manufacturing, and marketing of it became goals for someone. Even your toothbrush began as an idea, with a specific plan to achieve it. All tangible objects began as goals, plans, or ideas in the minds of people. This is a revolutionary concept, once you really allow it to grasp you, for it brings home the importance of the world of thought. Unfortunately, many Americans tend to downgrade the world of thought. When we call a person an intellectual, it is not always meant as a compliment. We respect the people who are characterized as doers, forgetting that every doer is first a thinker. Looking at things in this incomplete manner prevents us from seeing clearly that the world is changed by goals and plans conceived in the minds of men and women. It is really incredible when you realize that our school system consistently neglects to teach students how to set their own goals and make realistic plans to achieve them. Did you ever hear of a course like that in high school? In college? I never have. Frequently our schools even neglect to call attention to the Lesson 18-179 fact that such vital activities exist. The thought of setting goals and making plans just escapes the mind of many people. And yet, few things are more important to a person in achieving success in all fields of life than learning how to do it. This idea should really exist as a way of life and should be passed on from parents to their children. I sometimes mention goals and plans to people and ask them what it brings to mind. Most people say, oh, success in the business world, in science, or something like that. They usually don't mention the non-professional, personal world, such as their marriage. I think of a former patient of mine, Arthur, a 40-fractious man who owned his business and came to me because of increasing attacks of nerves, as he put it, in his work. He had just opened his second men's clothing store. Business was doing well financially, but his problems with the manager of his newly opened store were increasing. The manager had been a most satisfactory employee until he assumed his new position. Now, suddenly he wanted to change many of the concepts that had brought success to Arthur in the first place. Having always prided himself on his business judgment, Arthur was now losing confidence in himself. Was he falling behind the times? At 43, was he becoming an old fogey? As he discussed his business problems, Arthur kept mentioning his wife, Marie. They had been married for 20 years and had 2 teenage children. He often remarked how supportive and helpful his wife had been in the beginning when he had to struggle to establish his business. Although he hadn't come to me for marriage counseling, we started discussing his relationship with Marie. I pointed out that the closeness he had enjoyed during their early marriage seemed to have been replaced by a dull flatness. I suggested we also work on some goals and plans for his marriage. He said, I'm amazed, Doc. I never thought about setting goals for my marriage like I do for my business. He mentioned somewhat sheepishly that before he was married he used to romance his wife, as he put it, but it had been years since they had done anything spontaneous or romantic. After considerable discussion, we decided to start with a few simple plans to implement his newfound goals of putting some romance back into the marriage. I suggested starting with the easiest plans to achieve. He decided to buy a supply of love message cards for his wife and mail her one from time to time. He told me they had dutifully celebrated their anniversary on June 16th every year. So as an additional plan, I suggested they celebrate an 18 semester 4 anniversary on the 16th of every month. Finally, I suggested he take her out to dinner more often, just the 2 of them without the kids. Some of you may be thinking, well, there's very little spontaneity in those plans. Aren't those the sort of things he should think of on his own? Sure they are. But the answer is that if I had left it up to him, he might never have thought of them spontaneously this way. Once he got started on this program, his wife was so pleased that she began to cook special dishes he liked and do other little thoughtful things the way she had done early in their marriage. He told me happily, we're beginning to live with a kind of zing he'd forgotten about. Incidentally, as his marriage relationship began to change, he was also making a great deal of progress in his business relationships. Creativity in one area often helps in another. That most people have no goals or plans is unfortunate but not surprising, since the whole concept is an neglected area in our culture. Many people just exist from day to day, week to week, year to year. Others have goals, but they are so vague or passive, they are virtually worthless. Often I refer to these as money goals. They want a new Porsche, a trip to Europe, or a mink coat. Fine. Who doesn't? But to achieve such goals you need the money to pay for them. On this point, the person is usually quite vague and has no plan about how to get such a sum of money. There are some people who kind of have goals, but they are still in their unconscious mind, vague and undefined. These people have never taken the time to sit down and pinpoint the specific objectives of their lives. Still other people have goals that are impossible to obtain. One of my former patients, Bruce, had as his goal an early retirement at age 35. Since he was unable to do this, it had ruined his whole 35th birthday celebration. Obviously, this was an unrealistic goal, in spite of the fact that this bright young man was highly successful in the business world. How many people are able to retire by the age of 35, and on what, and why? In Bruce's case, he had no particular notion of what he wanted to do after retirement. Retirement was his whole goal. rather than it being somehow related to the rest of his life. If he had actually retired at 35, he would have discovered it to be an empty achievement. This man's goal was not only unrealistic, it was incomplete. Now I want to teach you how to develop meaningful goals, how to define them clearly, and how to create definite plans for reaching them. Lesson 18. 181. First, there is the area of your work. You may have many goals in mind here, including money goals such as travel, a new house, a new car, or college for your children. The place you are most likely to achieve these money goals is in your world of work. There is the area of your marriage. Setting goals in this area may head off divorce in the future or deepen an already satisfactory relationship. There is the area of children. Most parents have relatively few goals and plans for their children. Like firefighters, they rush around putting out daily fires and are too busy to set long-term goals and plans. These parents are missing a great deal in their emotional relationships with their children by not thinking about the future direction the children may take. If you are not married, then you may be concerned to set goals and plans so that you can find and marry someone with whom you can achieve a happy and lasting relationship. As someone has commented, most people put more time and care into choosing a new car than into choosing the right person to spend the rest of their life with. Finally, there is the whole area of friends. How superficial most relationships are with friends in today's culture. You may want to set some goals and plans here. Did mentioning these areas stimulate anything in your mind? Do you already have some goals in mind, or did you get a new idea or two? Obviously, this is worth putting some thoughtful time into. Consider these things as you go about the routine tasks of the day. Think about your work and its rewards, the quality of your home life, of your marriage, of your relationships with your children or your friends. Think about your children's future. Think about your own day-to-day existence. Be imaginative as you can. Consider these aspects of your life and how you could change or augment them. Let your creative mind be fanciful. Think up far-out ideas. Rediscover your dreams. At some point in this process, perhaps in a day or somewhat longer, you will be ready for specific planning. This is the most important step, taking specific action on your thoughts. Find half an hour when you will be free of all distractions. Use it to make a list of the previous goals you have thought of plus any new ones that occur to you. Include the most outrageous goals you can imagine. Don't worry about whether your ideas are realistic or unrealistic at this point, just write them down. After you have noted all your goals, go over the list carefully and pick out the 5 which are the most important to you. You may find this a very exciting process. 182. Semester 4. Your next step is to determine how to reach each of these 5 goals. Here's where most people go astray, because they start out with a plan that is much too ambitious. When it can't be achieved right away, they get discouraged and give up. These are the people who have not learned the lesson of the teaching machine. Even though many of you have heard the phrase teaching machine, you may not be familiar with the manner in which it works or the psychological principles on which it is based. The brother of the teaching machine, the programmed book, is a teaching machine in book form, based on exactly the same principes. The teaching machine or programmed book is planned so that the learner starts out answering very easy questions. He cannot go on to the next question until he has successfully answered the previous one. Finally, at the end of the program or book, the learner is answering very hard questions. The teaching machine or programmed book is constructed so that the student will be successful right from the beginning. Let the teaching machine be your model. First, you write down your goal. Your second job is to break your goal into a series of steps, beginning with steps which are absurdly easy. For example, I had a former patient, Max, 4 to 6 years old, who was really out of shape physically. One of his goals was to get back into good physical shape. When I asked him how he planned to do this, Max named a gym most expensive in the area and told me he was going to sign up for its full physical fitness program. He planned to swim 20 laps in the club's pool each morning on his way to work and stop by on the way home, each having to work out on their machines. I immediately realized that this was too elaborate a program and that he would last only a few weeks and then quit. I suggested we use the teaching machine approach instead. He liked the idea of jogging, so we agreed he should begin by jogging around his house and yard a mere 3 minutes a day. He wanted to do sit-ups to improve his stomach muscles. We decided he began by doing only 1 sit-up a day for the first week. Starting with this very easy program, of course he was successful. Little by little, over a period of 5 months, he worked up to jogging half an hour and doing 50 sit-ups each morning. When you are designing a step-6 plan to achieve your goal, whatever it is, think of my patient and his physical fitness program. Make your first steps to your goal absurdly easy so that you are sure to succeed. Then gradually increase them. Don't rush. Thinking of Max and his physical fitness program brings to Lesson 18, 183. Mind Janet, another former patient. Janet had been reducing off and on for years. She must have gained, lost, and regained the same 25 pounds at least a dozen times. What she really wanted to do was to lose weight and make sure it stayed off. When we discussed her goal, she realized that in the past she had lost a lot of weight quickly on a crash diet, but then regained it just as quickly. Janet had been doing a lot of reading about weight control, and she realized she would have a better chance of keeping the weight off if she lost it more slowly. After some discussion, she decided to try to lose half a pound a week. Since it takes 35 calories less than your normal diet to lose a pound a week, Janet needed to eat only 25 calories less each day in order to lose half a pound a week. This was not an impossible task, and to make it easier, she set up a reward system for herself. Since she was paid every 2 weeks at her job, she marked on her calendar the weight she expected to be on each payday for the next 6 months, i.e., 1 pound lighter than she had been the previous pay period. If she was a pound lighter, she bought herself an inexpensive present as long as it was food. Rewarding herself for accomplishing her goal at each stage proved to be the added incentive she needed. For the first time in her life, she not only lost the weight, but she did not gain it back again. Another example explores an entirely different area of human relationships. At the Truett-Horrid woman patient, Ellen was overwhelmed by feelings of isolation after her divorce. Her goal was to get back into the world of social relationships, but she was terribly afraid of being rejected. I suggested a plan in several steps. First, she was to apply for membership in Parents Without Partners, but she was not to go to any of the activities the first month. In fact, she was instructed not even to read the monthly newsletter listing the various activities. The second month she was to read the newsletter but not to attend any activities. The third month she was to participate in one discussion group only. The fourth month she was to go to discussion groups. Finally, the fifth month she was to attend a dance. It worked. With each succeeding month and each succeeding step, she built up the courage to try the next step of the plan. Some of these early steps may sound so slow that they don't make sense, and you may feel nothing is happening. Wrong. Something is happening, but it isn't particularly obvious. What is taking place is that your potential self is getting into gear for the eventual achievement of your goal. Often your goal is something you would have accomplished already if some repressive mecha, 184. Semester Fokker, Nis inside you had not interfered. In addition to guaranteeing success at each step by going slowly at first, you are allowing your sincere desire for the goal to start directing your actions. Some people, in working toward a goal, find themselves seized by inertia when it comes time for action. If this should happen to you, despite the small graduated steps, then it is time to re-examine your goal. Consider how important it actually is and then either discard the goal and replace it with a more suitable one, or continue the steps with a renewed sense of the value of achieving it. When you have chosen your first 5 goals, be sure to give your unconscious mind a chance to help plan the steps to make them work. With both your conscious and unconscious mind working on the problem, you will be making the best use of your creative mental resources. My suggestion on how you can best accomplish the planning stage is to write, in brief form on 3x5 cards, the 5 goals and any steps to achieve them. Tape one of these cards to your mirror where you can see it every day. Put the second one in your pocket or purse. This way you will be thinking daily, both consciously and unconsciously, of these 5 goals and the steps by which you can achieve them. I do not mean for you to threaten, pressuring yourself to come up fruitial with the right way to achieve them. Just think about them consciously from time to time as you go about your normal routine. At the same time, your unconscious will be doing its work. Your unconscious will usually contribute its part at some unexpected time, such as when you are eating lunch or playing tennis. When this happens, jot down the idea as soon as you can. For the most part, I am talking about practical, attainable goals. If you happen to choose a long-range endeavor, such as becoming a doctor, you will need to break it down into many steps leading to it. It is important, of course, to be realistic about goals. If you are 50 years old, it is not very realistic to decide to become a doctor. If you are 20, it may be. First, determine that you have the intellectual equipment and emotional stamina for the job. Get a professional evaluation of this before committing yourself to the goal. Some goals may be realistic when you set them, but life changes. Do not delude yourself into thinking that everything is standing still while you are moving toward your goals. Your goal may be to improve your marriage relationship, but while you are working toward this, your wife starts action for divorce. Your goal, Lesson 18, 185, may be to become president of your company. But a new scientific discovery suddenly creates the possibility of a new manufacturing division within your company structure. You realize that your real rewards lie in directing that new division rather than the entire firm. It is important that you not think of either your goals or your plans to achieve them as unalterable and carved in white marble. Goals are made to be shifted and plans are made to be changed. You have not failed if you shift a goal or change a plan, whether the choice was yours or not. A goal is an ideal then, and something entirely outside of your control may force you to lower your sights. Realistically speaking, you may be able to achieve only 25% of the goal you originally set. But remember, if you had not set it, you would not have achieved even that 25%. For example, you may have the goal of getting your children to take a more active part in doing chores around the house. You construct a set of plans to involve them in these activities. But after considerable effort on your part and theirs, they are still doing only about 5% of the chores you would like. It looks as if things are not going to improve any further, no matter what you try. Then it may be wise for you to accept the 5% as the most they are able to do and congratulate them and yourself for the improvements they have made. Some goals are ideals you will want to continue striving for in spite of difficulties. But when a goal no longer seems realistic, it is best to turn your attention to other goals. A goal should never be used as a perfectionist standard that forces you to call yourself a failure if you do not achieve it 1%. Remember the concept of a baseball player's batting average. A player who bats 3 is considered an excellent hitter. That means he gets 3 hits out of every 10 trips to the plate. Try to allow yourself the same kind of margin with your goals and plans. Don't demand that you bat 1 with your goals. Perfection, after all, is not very human. If you do the things outlined here, I can practically guarantee you will be more successful in your life than most people. You will have defined your goals clearly 5 at a time. You may not achieve all of every goal, but you will achieve at least part of each. Be sure to use the model of the teaching machine in programming your plans to achieve your goals. Always begin with ridiculously easy plans at first. This not only helps to start you off, but also to begin it successfully. It is likely you will continue to be successful as you advance from easier plans to harder ones. Above all, be flexible. Do not hesitate to change either a goal, 186, semester 4, or the plan leading up to it at any time. Do not let your goals run you. You run your goals. After all, you are not trying to add pressures and burdens to your life, you are adding focus. But be careful not to let yourself slip into the situation where your goals concern only your business or making money. Think of your marriage, your children, and your friends as important areas in which to improve your life. I have suggested you start by choosing 5 goals, which is a reasonable number to focus on. Obviously, you are not going to keep those same 5 goals forever. One of 2 things will happen. As you reach a goal, you will cross it off your list and replace it with a new one, or you will realize that a particular goal is no longer desirable or realistic, and you will adjust or replace it. And so you will go through your life, achieving, adjusting, or discarding goals and replacing them with new ones. In contrast to most people who let their lives just go along, your life will always be focused on specific goals with specific plans for achieving them. You will be on the move in all important areas of your life with a steady, consistent pace. You will be improving your situation and increasing your happiness. No matter how carefully you plan your goals, they will never be more than pipe dreams unless you pursue them with gusto. W. Clement Stone, Lesson 19, How to Become Enthusiastic and Stay That Way. Chances are that if you were asked to define a quitter, you would probably say that he or she is a person who gives up too easily. Have you ever wondered why some individuals hang on against all odds until they turn certain defeat into victory while others abandon a race, sometimes in sight of the finish line? Is brave with guts to endure, to get up off the canvas, to stick to something until it is completed an inherited trait. Noel, then what's the big difference between the person who perseveres and the person who quits? Enthusiasmus. If you think back on your life, you will agree that whenever you lost your enthusiasm for any activity, you also lost your desire to keep working at it, and when that happened, it was eventually pushed aside. You didn't call it quitting, but that's what it was. In many minor matters, your quitting didn't really matter so much, but in your major life functions, such as marriage or career, the results are often disastrous. Is there a danger that you might even lose your enthusiasm to work as hard as necessary to change your life for the better? Yes, you can lose your enthusiasm for anything unless you know how to keep those flames of ambition constantly burning inside you. W. Clement Stone, beginning as a newsboy on the sidewalks of Chicago, built the largest insurance company of its kind in 188. Semester 4, the world once he learned and applied the secret of generating enthusiasm within and maintaining it until he accomplished goal after goal. From the pages of his magazine, Success Unlimited, he shows you how, providing you are perceptive enough to spot his secret. As a house guest on many occasions, Father John O'Brien, research professor of theology at Notre Dame University, and I spent many delightful hours exchanging ideas. I recall a discussion on enthusiasm in which I stated enthusiasm is one of the most important factors necessary for success in selling. Yes, he responded, the first ingredient, which I believe is absolutely necessary for a successful, efficient, and competent salesman or individual, is enthusiasm. What is your meaning of enthusiasm? I asked. He replied, I think you would be interested in knowing what the etymological derivation of this word, which is so widely used, really is. It comes from two Greek words, and they let you look into the root of this word into its basic, fundamental, original meaning. The first is theos, which means God. The other two words are ente, so that in the early usage of this term among the ancient Greeks, it literally meant God within you. The divine being, who is the author and the source of all goodness and beauty and truth, honesty and love. God is in the heart of the individual who is possessed by a vision, who bums with ardor, who is determined to make a dream come true. God is there. God is kindling the fire. It is being kindled by God himself. He hesitated with an expression of deep thought and continued, on one occasion, New Trockney was visiting at the hospital bedside of one of the most gifted and brilliant players who ever walked upon the striped field of Notre Dame Stadium. He had all the evidence of a fatal illness. His name was George Gibb. He was nicknamed the Gipper. He's a legend for us. The Gipper brings inspiration and gigapacor to every player who wears the uniform of Notre Dame. George Gibb is the only man of whom it has been said that he never allowed a pass to be completed by an opponent in his territory. Lesson 19, 189. After a brief talk in which Rocky knelt at his bedside and prayed to Almighty God to give George the courage and the strength to face the greatest event of his life. His departure, George Gibb looked up at him and said, Rock, it's tough to go now. This was toward the latter part of the football season. It's tough to go now, but someday, he said, when the going is tough and the breaks are beating our players, tell them to go in and win one more for the Gipper. I don't know where it'll be, but I do know this that I shall know of its occurrence. About 5 years later, when Notre Dame was playing its favorite adversary back in those days, 30 years ago, Army, New Trockney had one of the weakest teams that he ever coached at Notre Dame. The score at the end of the first half was 21-7 in favor of the Army. When the players trooped off the field into the locker room at intermission between the halves, Rockney told them the story of the Gipper with all the sincerity and emotion he knew how to express. And he said, boys, I know that the conditions are fulfilled, which would justify me in telling you the story of the Gipper. I've never told it to you before, but the time has come. I know that the going has been tough today. Unfortunate breaks have been beating you down. You feel licked. But you must now regain the pride that has forever graced the player that wore the honored colors of Notre Dame. The Gipper. He told the story of George Gibb's last words to him, and then, in a commanding voice, said, let's go out there with enthusiasm and win one roar for the Gipper. The players were emotionized. They rushed from the locker room. They played as men transformed. They hit. They ran. They passed. They blocked. They transcended their known abilities. Rockme later said, "I have never seen a team of such mediocre talent play with such courage, vigor, zeal, enthusiasm." And when the shadows settled upon that field that dark day, in November, the score Army West Point 21. Notre Dame 28. If you walk into the locker rooms where the athletes dress, you will find on a bronze tablet those words when the going gets tough and the brakes are beating our boys, "Go in there and win, one roar for the Gipper." It is that spirit which I think year after year has taken players of rather mediocre ability, transformed them, given them a courage and an enthusiasm without which no battle of any importance can be won. 19. Semester 4. Develop enthusiasm at will, whoever you may be: executive, lawyer, doctor, teacher, sales manager, superintendent, foreman, athletic coach, priest, or rabbi. You will have many struggles and battles of importance in influencing others, achieving your desirable goals, and eliminating your undesirable habits. You will win or lose depending upon your willingness to pay the price to regularly engage in thinking and planning time and to use your mind power to develop a truly positive mental attitude and eliminate the negative. No battle of any importance can be won without enthusiasm, said Father O'Brien. But how do you develop enthusiasm, you may ask? Here's my response: to become enthusiastic for achieving a desirable goal. Keep your mind on your goal day after day. The more worthy and desirable your objective, the more dedicated and enthusiastic you will become. Understand and act on Professor William James' statement: the emotions are not always immediately subject to reason, but they are always immediately subject to action. Illustrations say you are called upon to make a speech before a few thousand persons, and you are not experienced in public speaking. You will be timid and afraid to get up on the platform to speak. You can use the self-motivates that appeal to reason, such as success is achieved by those who try, and where there is nothing to lose by trying, and a great deal to gain if successful, by all means try. Then use the self-straighter do it now and immediately get into action. Walk up to the podium. When you get there, you may be under the emotion of fear. To neutralize this fear, talk loudly, rapidly, emphasize important words, hesitate where there is a period, comma, or other punctuation in the written word. Keep a smile in your voice and then use modulation. When the butterflies stop flying in your stomach, you can talk just as enthusiastically in the conversational tone. It works 1 times out of 1. Professor James pointed out a universal truth that feelings, moods, and emotions will follow action. If you want to be enthusiastic, act enthusiastically. Your net worth to the world is usually determined by what remains after your bad habits are subtracted from your good ones. Benjamin Franklin, Lesson 2, How to Eliminate Your Bad Habits. Rare is the wise man who has not had a definite opinion about habits. John Dryden said, "We first make our habits, and then our habits make us." Horace Mann wrote, "Habit is a cable. We weave a thread of it every day, and at last we cannot break it." And Samuel Johnson exclaimed, "The chains of habit are generally too small to be felt until they are too strong to be broken." If this classroom is packed beyond its capacity, it is because you have all gathered here for the same proposito here. America's first authentic genius, Benjamin Franklin, described to you in his own characteristics way exactly how he broke the chains of his own bad habits, habits that would have prevented him from ever reaching the stature that he finally attained. During your lifetime, you have accumulated thousands of habits. Most of them are good ones. Some are even necessary for your swivel. For example, you probably drive an automobile 1 or more times each day. Soon after your first driving lesson, the countless actions necessary to pilot your vehicle became habits. If you always had to stop and think before you engaged in every step necessary to drive, you would probably become a highway fatality in short order. Along with all those good habits, however, you also have some that are harmful, and if you were pressed, you could probably compile a fairly complete list of them. You might even admit, if you happen to be feeling sorry for yourself, that you realize 191, 192. Semester 4, they are holding you back, but you just don't know what to do about them. That won't be your excuse any longer. After Mr. Franklin, in this excerpt from the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, has had a talk with you. Though I seldom attended any public worship, I had still an opinion of its propriety and of its utility when rightly conducted, and I regularly paid my annual subscription for the support of the only Presbyterian minister or meeting we had in Philadelphia. He used to visit me sometimes as a friend and admonish me to attend his administrations, and I was now and then prevailed on to do so, once for 5 Sundays successively. Had he been, in my opinion, a good preacher, perhaps I might have continued, notwithstanding the occasion I had for the Sunday's leisure in my course of study. But his discourses were chiefly either polemic arguments or explications of the peculiar doctrines of our sect, and were all to me very dry and interesting and unedifying, since not a single moral principle was inculcated or enforced, their aim seeming to be rather to make us Presbyterians than good citizens. At length he took for his text that verse of the 4th chapter of Philippians, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, or of good report, if there be any virtue or any praise, think on these things. And I imagined in a sermon on such a text, we could not miss of having some morality. But he confined himself to 5 points only as meant by the apostle, namely 1. Keeping holy the Sabbath day, 2. Being diligent in reading the Holy Scriptures, 3. Attending duly the public worship, 4. Partaking of the sacrament, 5. Paying the due respect to God's ministers. These might be all good things, but as they were not the kind of good things that I expected from the text, I despaired of ever meeting with them from any other, was disgusted, and attended his preaching no more. I had some years before composed a little liturgy or form of prayer for my own private use, namely, in 1728, entitled Articles of Belief and Acts of Religion. I returned to the use of this, and went no more to the public assemblies. My conduct might be blamable, but I leave it without attempting further to excuse it, my present purpose being to relate facts and not to make apologies for them. Lesson 2. 193. The bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection. It was about this time I conceived the bold and arduous project of arriving at moral perfection. I wished to live without committing any fault at any time. I would conquer all that either natural inclination, custom, or company might lead me into. As I knew or thought I knew what was right and wrong, I did not see why I might not always do the one and avoid the other. But I soon found I had undertaken a task of more difficulty than I had imagined. While my care was employed in guarding against one fault, I was often surprised by another habit, took the advantage of an attention inclination was sometimes too strong for reason. I concluded, at length, that the mere speculative conviction that it was our interest to be completely virtuous was not sufficient to prevent our slipping, and that the contrary habits must be broken and good ones acquired and established before we can have any dependence on a steady, uniform rectitude of conduct. For this purpose I therefore contrived the following method. In the various enumerations of the moral virtues I had met with in my reading, I found the catalogue more or less numerous, as different writers included more or fewer ideas under the same name. Temperance, for example, was by some confined to eating and drinking, while by others it was extended to mean the moderating of every other pleasure, appetite, inclination, or passion, bodily or mental, even to our avarice and ambition. I proposed to myself, for the sake of clearness, to use rather more names with fewer ideas annexed to each than a few names with more ideas, and I concluded under 13 names of virtues all that at that time occurred to me as necessary or desirable, and annexed to each a short precept which fully expressed the extent I gave to its meaning. These names of virtues with their precepts were: 1. Temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. 2. Silence. Speak not but what may benefit others, or yourself avoid trifling conversation. 3. Order. Let all your things have their places, let each part of your business have its time. 4. Resolution. Resolve to perform what you ought perform, without fail what you resolve. Semester 4, 194. 5. Frugality. Make no expense but to do good to others or yourself, that is, waste nothing. 6. Industry. 7. Sincerity. Use no hurtful deceit, think innocently and justly, and if you speak, speak accordingly. 8. Justice. 9. Moderation. 1. Cleanliness. Lose no time, be always employed in something useful, cut off all unnecessary actions. Wrong none by doing injuries or omitting the benefits that are your duty. Avoid extremes, forbear resenting injuries so much as you think they deserve. Tolerate no uncleanliness in body, clothes, or habitation. 11. Tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles, or at accidents, common or unavoidable. 12. Chastity. 13. Humility. Rarely use venery, but for health or offspring, never to dullness, weakness, or the injury of your own or another's peace or reputation. Imitate Jesus and Socrates. My intention being to acquire the habitude of all these virtues, I judged it would be well not to distract my attention by attempting the whole at once, but to fix it on one of them at a time, and, when I should be master of that, then to proceed to another, and so on, till I should have gone through the 13, and, as the previous acquisition of some might facilitate the acquisition of certain others, I arranged them with that view as they stand above. Temperance first, as it tends to procure that coolness and clearness of head which is so necessary where constant vigilance was to be kept up and guard maintained against the unremitting attraction of ancient habits and the force of perpetual temptations. This being acquired and established, silence would be more easy, and my desire being to gain knowledge at the same time that I improved in virtue, and considering that in conversation it was obtained rather by the use of the ears than of the tongue, and therefore wishing to break a habit I was getting into of prattling, punning, and joking, which only made me acceptable to trifling company, I gave silence the second place. This and the next order I expected would allow me more time for attending to my project and my studies. Resolution, once become habitual, lesson 2. 195, would keep me firm in my endeavors to obtain all the subsequent virtues, frugality and industry, freeing me from my remaining debt, and producing effusion and independence, would make more easy the practice of sincerity and justice, and so forth. Conceiving then that agreeably to the advice of Pythagoras in his Gold on Verses daily examination would be necessary, I contrived the Fculfing method for conducting that examination. I made a little book in which I allotted a page for each of the virtues. I ruled each page with reed ink so as to have 7 columns, one for each day of the week, marking each column with a letter for the day. I crossed these columns with 13 red lines, marking the beginning of each line with the first letter of one of the virtues, on which line, and in its proper column, I might mark, by a little black spot, every fault I found upon examination to have been committed respecting that virtue upon that day. I determined to give a week's strict attention to each of the virtues successively. Thus, in the first week my great guard was to avoid even the least offense against temperance, leaving the other virtues to their ordinary chance, only marking every evening the faults of the day. Thus, if in the first week I could keep my first line marked T clear of spots, I suppose the habit of that virtue so much strengthened, and its opposite week, and that I might venture extending my attention to include the next, and for the following week keep both lines clear of spots. Proceeding thus to the last, I could go through a course complete in 13 weeks, and 4 courses in a year. And like him who, having a garden to weed, does not attempt to eradicate all the bad herbs at once, which would exceed his reach and his strength, but works on one of the beds at a time, and, having accomplished the first, proceeds to a second, so I should have, I hoped, the encouraging pleasure of seeing on my pages the progress I made in virtue by clearing successively my lines of their spots. Still in the end, by a number of courses, I should be happy in viewing a clean book after a 13 weeks daily examination. I entered upon the execution of this plan for self-examination, and continued it with occasional intermissions for some time. I was surprised to find myself so much fuller of faults than I had imagined, but I had the satisfaction of seeing them diminish. To avoid the trouble of renewing now and then my little book, which, by scraping out the marks on the paper of old faults to make room for new ones in a new course, became full of holes, I transferred my tables and precepts to the ivory leaves of a memorandum book hoary, which the lines were drawn with reed ink that made a durable stain. 196. Semester 4. And on those lines one marked my faults with a black lead pencil, which marks one could easily wipe out with a wet sponge. After a while one went through one course only in a year, and afterward only one in several years, till at length one omitted them entirely, being employed in voyages and business abroad with a multiplicity of affairs that interfered, but one always carried my little book with me. My list of virtues contained at first but 12, but a Quaker friend having kindly informed me that one was generally thought proud, that my pride showed itself frequently in conversation, that one was not content with being in the right when discussing any point, but was overbearing and rather insolent, of which he convinced me by mentioning several instances, one determined endeavoring to cure myself, if one could, of this vice or folly among the rest, and one added humility to my list, giving extensive meaning to the word. One cannot boast of much success in acquiring the reality of this virtue, but one had a good deal with regard to the appearance of it. 1. Made it a rule to forbear all direct contradiction to the sentiments of others and all positive assertion of my own. 1. Even forbade myself, agreeably to the old laws of our junto, the use of every word or expression in the language that indicated a fixed opinion, such as certainly, undoubtedly, and so forth, and one adopted instead of them, I conceive, I apprehend, or I imagine a thing to be so, or it so appears to me at present. When another asserted something that one thought an error, one denied myself the pleasure of contradicting him abruptly and of showing immediately some absurdity in his proposition, and in answering one, began by observing that in certain cases or circumstances his opinion would be right, but in the present case there appeared or seemed to me some difference, and so forth. One soon found the advantage of this change in my manner. The conversations one engaged in went on more pleasantly. The modest way in which one proposed my opinions procured them a readier reception and less contradiction. One had less mortification when one was found to be in the wrong, and one more easily prevailed with others to give up their mistakes and join with me when one happened to be in the right. And this mode, which one at first put on with some violence to natural inclination, became at length so easy and so habitual to me that perhaps for these 50 years past no one has ever heard a dogmaticable expression escape me. And to this habit after my character of integrity one think it principally owing that one had early so much weight with my felicitifists when one proposed new institutions or alterations in the old, and so much influence in Lesson 2, 197, public councils when I became a member, for I was but a bad speaker, never eloquent, subject to much hesitation in my choice of words, hardly correct in language, and yet I generally carried my points. In Semester 5, dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff life is made of. Benjamin Franklin. Procrastination is one of the most common and deadliest of diseases, and its toll on success and happiness is heavy. Dr. Wayne W. Dyer. Lesson 21. How to stop putting things off. Never put off till tomorrow that which you can do today. All of us have lived with Benjamin Franklin's wise admonition since our early youth. It is a favorite utterance of all parents. We heard it from ours, and now we repeat it to our own children. And yet, although we acknowledge the great truth in that axiom, we usually conduct our lives as if its words were transposed to read, never do today that which you can put off till tomorrow. Unfortunately, there is no tomorrow. It can only be found in the calendars of fools. Tomorrow for them is the day when they will begin their journey toward success and riches. Tomorrow is the day they will reform, work harder, change their habits, repair broken friendships, repay old debts, apply for a better job. But tomorrow never comes, and countless lives that held so much promise are wasted in procrastination. As Stephen Leacock wrote long ago, the child says, "When I'm a big boy, but what is that?" The big boy says, "When I grow up," and then, grown up, he says, "When I get married." But to be married, what is that after all? The thought changes to when I'm able to retire. And when retirement comes, he looks back over the landscape traversed. Cold wine seems to sweep over it. Somehow he has missed it all, and it is gone. Success and procrastination are absolutely incompatible. In order to succeed you must, and you can, cure yourself of putting things off, and best-selling author Dr. Wayne W. Dyer will teach you how from his book, Your Erroneous Zones. Profit from this lesson, not tomorrow but now. 21-22. Semester 5, are you a procrastinator? If you're like most people, the answer to that is yes. But chances are that you'd rather not live with all that anxiety that accompanies putting things off as a way of life. You may find yourself postponing many tasks that you want to accomplish, and yet for some reason you just keep suspending action. This procrastination business is a mighty tiresome facet of life. If you've got a bad case, hardly a day goes by that you don't say, "I know I should be doing it, but I'll get around to it later." Your putting it off erroneous zone is difficult to blame on outside forces. It's all yours, both the putting off and the discomfort you endure as a result of it. Procrastination is the closest there is to a universal erroneous zone. Very few people can honestly say that they are not procrastinators, despite the fact that it is unhealthy in the long run. As in all erroneous zones, there is nothing unhealthy about the behavior itself. Putting it off, in fact, doesn't even exist. You simply do. And those things you don't do, in reality, are just undone rather than postponed. It is only the accompanying emotional reaction and immobilization that represent neurotic behavior. If you feel that you put things off and like it, with no attending guilt, anxiety, or upset, then by all means hang on to it. However, for most people, procrastination is really an escape from living present moments as fully as possible. The hoping, wishing, and maybe 3 neurotic phrases of the procrastinator make up the support system for maintaining putting-pitted behavior. I hope things will work out. I wish things were better. Maybe it'll be okay. There you have the deferrer's delight. As long as you say maybe or hope or wish, you can use these as a rationale for not doing anything now. All wishing and hoping are a waste of timeth, folly of fairyland residents. No amount of either ever got anything accomplished. They are merely convenient escape clauses from Lesson 21. 23. Rolling up your sleeves and taking on the tasks that you've decided are important enough to be on your list of life activities. You can do anything that you set your mind to accomplish. You are strong, capable, and not the least bit brittle. But by putting things off for a future moment, you are giving into escapism, self-dits, and most significantly, self-dulsion. Your putting-pitted zone is a movement away from being strong in your now and toward the direction of hoping that things will improve in the future. Inertia as a strategy for living. Here is a sentence that can keep you inert in your present moment. Still wait, and it'll get better. For some, this becomes a way of life. They are always putting it off for a day that can never arrive. Mark, a recent client of mine, came to me complaining about his unhappy marriage. Mark was in his 50s and had been married for almost 30 years. As we began to talk about his marriage, it became clear that Mark's complaints were long-standing. It's never been any good, even from the beginning, he said at one point. One asked Mark what had made him hold on for all these years of misery. I kept hoping things would get better, he confessed. Almost 30 years of hope, and Mark and his wife were still miserable. As we talked more about Mark's life and marriage, he admitted to a history of impotence that went back at least a decade. Had he ever sought help for this problem? One asked. No, he had merely avoided sex more and more and hoped that the problem would go away on its own. I was sure things would get better, Mark echoed his original comment. Mark and his marriage were a classic case of inertia. He avoided his problems and justified his avoidance by saying, if one wait and do nothing, maybe it'll work itself out. But Mark learned that things never work themselves out. They remain precisely as they are. At best, things change, but they don't get better. Things themselves, circumstances, situations, events, people will not improve alone. If your life is better, it is because you have done something constructive to make it better. Let's take a closer look at this procrastination behavior and how to eliminate it with some rather simple resolutions. This is one zone that you can clean up without a lot of hard mental work, since it is one that you alone have created for yourself. 24. Semester 5, without any of the cultural reinforcement, that is the hallmark of so many other erroneous zones. How procrastination works. Donald Marquis called procrastination the art of keeping up with yesterday. To this one would add, and avoiding today. This is how it works. You know there are certain things you want to do, not because others have so dictated, but because they are your deliberate choices. However, many of them never get done, despite your telling yourself that they will. Resolving to do something in the future which you could do now is an acceptable substitute for doing it, and permits you to delude yourself that you are really not compromising yourself by not doing what you have set out to do. It's a handy system that works something like this. I know one must do that, but am really afraid that one might do it well, or one won't like doing it. So I'll tell myself that he'll do it in the future, then one don't have to admit to myself that I'm not going to do it. And it is easier to accept myself this way. This is the sort of convenient, if fallacious reasoning that can be brought into play when you are faced with having to do something which is unpleasant or difficult. You are a person who lives one way and says you are going to live another way in the future. Those proclamations are empty. You are simply a person who is always adjourning and never getting things done. There are, of course, degrees of procrastination. It is possible to put things off up to a point, and then complete a task just prior to the deadline. Here again is a common form of self-dulsion. You allow yourself an absolute minimum amount of time to get your work done, then you can justify sloppy results or less than top-notch performance by saying to yourself, I just didn't have enough time. But you have plenty of time. You know that busy people get things done. But if you spend your time complaining about how much you have to do procrastination, then you'll have no presentiment time for doing it. I once had a colleague who was a procrastination specialist. He was always busy chasing down deals and talking about how much he had to do. When he talked, others got tired just imagining the pace of his life. But a close look would reveal that my colleague actually did very little. He had a zillion projects going in his mind and never got down to work on any of them. One imagined that each night before dozing off, he deluded himself with a promise that tomorrow he would get that job finished. How else? Lesson 21. 25. Could he go off to sleep with his self-delusion new system intact? He may have known that he would not, but so long as he swore that he would, his present moments were safe. You are not necessarily what you say. Behavior is a much better barometer of what you are than words. What you do in your present moments is the only indicator of what you are as a person. Emerson wrote, "Do not say things. What you are stands over you the while, and thunders so that I cannot hear what you say to the contrary. Next time as you say you'll get it done, but know that you won't, keep those words in mind. They are the antidote to procrastination." Critics and doers, putting it off as a way of life is one technique that you can use to avoid doing. A non-doer is very often a critic, that is, someone who sits back and watches doers, and then waxes philosophically about how the doers are doing. It is easy to be a critic, but being a doer requires effort, risk, and change. The critic, our culture, is full of critics. We even pay to hear them. As you observe yourself and the people around you, take note of how much social intercourse is devoted to criticism. Why? Because it is just plain easier to talk about how someone else has performed than to be the performer. Take note of real champions, those who have sustained a high level of excellence over a period of time. The Henry Aarons, the Johnny Carsons, the Bobby Fishers, the Katharine Hepburns, the Joe Lewises, and people of that ilk. Doers at the highest levels. Champions in every V. Why do they sit around poking serious criticism at others? The real doers of the world have no time for criticizing others. They are too busy doing. They work. They help others who are not as talented, rather than serve as their critics. Constructive criticism can be useful, but if you've chosen the role of an observer rather than a doer, you are not growing. Moreover, you may be using your criticism to absolve yourself of the responsibility for your own ineffectiveness by projecting it onto those who are really making an effort. You can learn to ignore the fault funders and self-appointed critics. Your first strategy will be 226. Semester 5, recognize these same behaviors in yourself and resolve to eliminate them entirely so that you can be a doer rather than a procrastinating critic. Boredom, a spin-off of procrastination. Life is never boring, but some people choose to be bored. The concept of boredom entails an inability to use up present moments in a personally fulfilling way. Boredom is a choice, something you visit upon yourself, and it is another of those self-defacing items that you can eliminate from your life. When you procrastinate, you use your present moments, doing nothing, as an alternative to doing anything. Doing nothing leads to boredom. The tendency is to blame boredom on the environment. This town is really dull, or what a boring speaker. The particular town or speaker is never dull, it is you experiencing the boredom, and you can eliminate it by doing something else with your mind or energy at that moment. Samuel Butler said, "The man who lets himself be bored is even more contemptible than the bore." By doing what you choose now or using your mind in creative new ways now, you can ensure that you'll never again choose boredom for yourself. The choice, as always, is yours. Some typical procrastinating behavior. Here are some areas where procrastination is a much easier choice than action. Staying in a job in which you find yourself stuck and unable to grow. Hanging onto a relationship that has gone sour. Staying married or unmarried and merely hope in bad it will get better. Refusing to work on relationship difficulties such as sex, shyness, or phobias. Simply waiting for them to improve, instead of trying to do something constructive about them. Not tackling addictions such as alcoholism, drugs, pills, or smoking. Saying 111 quit when I'm ready, but knowing that you are putting it off because you doubt that you can. Putting off arduous or menial tasks such as cleaning, repairing, sewing, lawn work, painting, and the liquor provides you really care about whether or not they get done. If you wait long enough, maybe it will get done by itself. Lesson 21. 27. Avoiding a confrontation with others, such as an authority figure, a friend, a lover, a salesperson, or a serviceman. By waiting, you end up not having to do it, although the confrontation might have improved the relationship or the service. Being afraid to change locations geographically. You stay in the same place for a lifetime. Putting off spending a day or an hour with your children, which you might enjoy because you have too much work or are bogged down in serious matters. Similarly, not going out for an evening to dinner or to the theater or sports event with your loved ones and using your Invisalign to postpone it forever. Deciding to start your diet tomorrow or next week. It's easier to putify than to take diet, so you say, "I'll get to it tomorrow," which of course will never arrive. Using sleep or tiredness as a reason for putting it off. Did you ever notice how tired you get when you are close to actually doing something uncomfortable or difficult? A little fatigue is a terrific deferring device. Getting sick when you are faced with a disquieting or troublesome task. How could you possibly do it now when you feel so terrible? Like exhaustion above, it's an excellent technique for procrastinating. The "I don't have time to do it" ruse, in which you justify not doing something because of your busy schedule, which always has room for those things that you really want to do. Constantly looking forward to a vacation or that dream trip next year, well, find nirvana. Being a critic and using your criticism of others to camouflage your own refusal to do. Refusing to get a physical checkup when you suspect some dysfunction. By putting it off, you don't have to deal with the reality of possible illness. Being afraid to make a move towards someone you're fond of. It's what you want, but you'd rather wait it out and hope that things work out. Being bored at any time in your life. This is merely a way of putting off something and using the boring event as a reason for not doing something more exciting. Planning but never putting in action a regular exercise program. I'll get started on that right away. Next week. Living your entire life for your children and always putting off your own happiness. How can we afford a vacation when we have the kids' education to worry about? 28. Semester 5. Reasons for continuing to put it off. The rationale for putting it off is composed of 1 part, self-dulsion, and 2 parts, escape. Here are the most important rewards for hanging on to procrastination. Most obviously, putting it off allows you to escape from unpleasant activities. There may be things you're afraid to do or things part of you wants to do, part of you doesn't. Remember, nothing is black or white. You can feel comfortable with your self-delusion new system. Lying to yourself keeps you from having to admit that you are not a doer in this particular present moment. You can stay exactly as you are forever, as long as you keep putting it off. Thus, you eliminate change and all the risks that go with it. By being bored, you have someone or something else to blame for your unhappy state. Thus, you shift responsibility away from yourself and onto the boring activity. By being a critic, you can feel important at the expense of others. It is a way of using others' performance as stepping stones for elevating yourself in your own mind. More self-dulsion. By waiting for things to get better, you can blame the world for your unhappiness just never seem to break for you. A great strategy for doing nothing. You can avoid ever having to fail by avoiding all activities which involve some risk. In this way, you never have to come face to face with your self-doubts. Wishing for things to happen, Santa Claus Fantaso Iglesias, you to return to a safe and protected childhood. You can win sympathy from others and feel sorry for yourself, for the anxiety that you live with as a result of not doing what you'd like to have done. You are able to justify a sloppy or less than acceptable performance on anything if you put it off long enough, and then just allow a minimal time segment for getting it done. But I just didn't have time. By putting it off, you might be able to get someone else to do it for you. Thus, procrastination becomes a means of manipulating others. Putting it off enables you to delude yourself into believing that you are something other than what you really are. By avoiding a task, you can escape success. If you don't, Lesson 21. 29. Succeed, you avoid having to feel good about yourself and accepting all of the continuing responsibility that goes with success. Now that you have some insight into why you procrastinate, you can begin to do something about eliminating this self-destructive, erroneous zone. Some techniques for ousting this postponing behavior: make a decision to live 5 minutes at a time. Instead of thinking of tasks in long-range terms, think about now and try to use upafeva munitum period, doing what you want, refusing to put off anything that would bring about satisfaction. Sit down and get started on something you've been postponing. Begin a letter or a book. You'll find that much of your putting it off is unnecessary, since you'll very likely find the job enjoyable once you give up the procrastination. Simply beginning will help you to eliminate anxiety about the whole project. Ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen to me if I did what I'm putting off right now? The answer is usually so insignificant that it may jar you into action. Assess your fear, and you'll have no reason to hang on to it. Give yourself a designated time slot, say Wednesday from 1 to 1:15 p.m., which you will devote exclusively to the task you've been putting off. You'll discover that the 15 minutes of devoted effort are often sufficient to see you over the hump of procrastination. Think of yourself as too significant to live with anxiety about the things you have to do. So the next time you know you are uncomfortable with postponement anxiety, remember that people who love themselves don't hurt themselves that way. Look carefully at your now. Decide what you are avoiding in your current moments and begin to tackle the fear of living effectively. Procrastination is substituting the now with anxiety about a future event. If the event becomes the now, the anxiety, by definition, must go. Quit smoking. Now, begin your diet. This moment, give up booze. This second, do one push-up as your beginning exercise project. That's how you tackle problems. With action now, do it. The only thing holding you back is you, and the neurotic choices you've made because you don't believe you're as strong as you really are. How simple. Just do it. Start using your mind creatively in what were previously 21 semester avenue, boring circumstances. At a meeting, change the dull tempo with a pertinent question, or make your mind go off in exciting ways such as writing a poem or memorizing 25 numbers backward, just for the sheer thrill of memory training. Decide to never be bored again. When someone begins to criticize you, ask this question: do you think one need a critic now? Or when you find yourself being a critic, ask the person in your company if he wants to hear your criticism, and if so, why. This will help you to move from the critic to the doer column. Look hard at your life. Are you doing what you'd choose to be doing if you knew you had 6 months to live? If not, you'd better begin doing it, because, relatively speaking, that's all you have. Given the eternity of time, 30 years or 6 months make no difference. Your total lifetime is a mere speck. Delaying anything makes no sense. Be courageous about undertaking an activity that you've been avoiding. One act of courage can eliminate all that fear. Stop telling yourself that you will perform well. Remind yourself that doing it is far more important. Decide not to be tired until the moment before you get into bed. Don't allow yourself to use fatigue or illness as an escape, or to put off doing anything. You may find that when you take away the reason for the illness or exhaustion, taste is avoidance of a task, physical problems magically disappear. Eliminate the words hope, wish, and maybe from your vocabulary. They are the tools of putting it off. If you see these words creeping in, substitute new sentences. Change: I hope things will work out, to I will make it happen. I wish things were better, to I am going to do the following things to ensure that one feel better. Maybe it will be okay, to I will make it okay. Keep a journal of your own complaining or critical behavior. By writing these actions down, you'll accomplish 2 things. You'll see how your critical behavior surfaces in your life, frequent patterns, events, and people that are related to your being a critic. You'll also stop yourself from criticizing, because it will be such a pain to have to write in the journal. If you are putting something off which involves others, a move, a sex problem, a new job, have a conference with all involved and ask their opinions. Be courageous about talking of your own fears, and see if you are delaying for reasons that are only in your head. By enlisting the aid of a confidant to help you, Lesson 21. 211. With your procrastination, you will have made it a joint effort. Soon, you will dissipate much of the anxiousness that goes along with procrastination by sharing that as well. Write a contract with your loved ones in which you will deliver the goods you want to, but which you may have been postponing. Have each party keep a copy of the contract and build in penalties for defaulting. Whether it's a ball game, dinner out, vacation, or theater visit, you will find this strategy helpful and personally rewarding, since you'll be participating in events that you also find enjoyable. If you want the world to change, don't complain about it. Do something. Rather than using up your present moments with all kinds of immobilizing anxiety over what you are putting off, take charge of this nasty erroneous zone and live now. Be a doer, not a wisher, hoper, or critic. But you possess as much of this precious commodity as the richest person in the world, and yet you may not realize how wealthy you are. Arnold Bennett, Arthur Brisbane, Lesson 22, How to Cherish and Use the Magic of Time. If you kept a careful diary of all your activities for any 7-day period, you would probably be shocked and shamefaced at the number of hours you fritter away each week doing little or nothing. This is an unusual lesson, since not one, but two distinguished individuals will make brief appearances before you with but one proposito help you appreciate that mysterious gift we all receive called time. Arnold Bennett was a prolific English novelist, best known for his masterful work, The Old Wives' Tale. Since he wrote nearly 500,000 words a year during the height of his career, his friends were always inquiring as to the secret of his incredible production. In response, he finally wrote a small book, How to Live on 24 Hours a Day, which has been treasured by millions for more than 70 years and is still in print. His portion of this lesson is from that book. Following Mr. Bennett is another man of letters, Arthur Brisbane, with a powerful suggestion that could be worth a fortune to you. Mr. Brisbane, an American editor and columnist, managed to emain incredible income from his enterprises, exceeding more than 1 million dollars a year even during the depths of the Great Depression, primarious because he knew how to make the greatest possible use of what he called his odd moments. Relief Street. Mr. Bennett, followed by Mr. Brisbane's lesson from the book, Elbert Hubbard's Scrapbook, but proceed with this warning. Do not let the brevity of either lecture lull you into taking its 214 Semester 5 words lightly. Chances are you may find yourself recalling their wisdom often in the years to come. Yes, he's one of those men who don't know how to manage good situation, regular income, quite enough for luxuries as well as needs, not really extravagant. And yet the fellow's always in difficulties. Somehow he gets nothing out of his money. Excellent flaffle femple always looks as if head had the pawnbrokers in. New suited hattle magnificent necked biggity trousers. I asks you to dinner cut glass bad mutton or Turkish kafik red couple. He can't understand it. Explanation simply is that he fritters his income away. Wish I had the halflet if it'd show him. So we have most of us criticized, at one time or another in our superior way. We are nearly all chancellors of the exchequer. It is the pride of the moment. Newspapers are full of articles explaining how to live on such a sum, and how these articles provoke a correspondence whose violence proves the interest they excite. Recently, in a daily organ, a battle raged round the question whether a woman can exist nicely in the country on 85 a year. I have seen an essay, How to Live on 8 shillings a week, but I have never seen an essay, How to Live on 24 hours a day. Yet it has been said that time is money. That proverb understates the case. Time is a great deal more than usual. But though you have the wealth of a cloakroom attendant at the Carlton Hotel, you cannot buy yourself a minute more time than Halve or the cat by the fire has. Philosophers have explained space. They have not explained time. It is the inexplicable raw material of everything. With it, lel is possible; without it, nothing. The supply of time is truly a daily miracle, an affair genuinely astonishing when one examines it. You wake up in the morning, and 11 your purse is magic-afflated with 24 hours of the unmanufactured tissue of the universe of your Lafayette is yours. It is the most precious of possessions. A highly singular commodity, showered upon you in a manner as singular as the commodity itself, for remark no one can take it from you. It is unstalable, and no one receives either more or less than you receive. Talk about an ideal democracy in the realm of time. There is, Lesson 22. 215. No aristocracy of wealth, and no aristocracy of intellect. Genius is never rewarded by even an extra hour a day, and there is no punishment. Waste your infinitely precious commodity as much as you will, and the supply will never be withheld from you. No mysterious power will say this man is a fool, if not a knave. He does not deserve time, he shall be cut off at the meter. It is more certain than bonds, and payment of income is not affected by Sundays. Moreover, you cannot draw on the future. Impossible to get into debt. You can only waste the passing moment. You cannot waste tomorrow, it is kept for you. You cannot waste the next hour, it is kept for you. I said the affair was a miracle. Is it not? You have to live on this 24 hours of daily time. Out of it you have to spend health, pleasure, money, content, respect, and the evolution of your immortal soul. Its right use, its most effective use, is a matter of the highest urgency and of the most thrilling actuality. All depends on that. Your happention elusive prize, that you are all clutching for, my friends, depends on that. Strange that the newspapers, so enterprising and up-to-date as they are not full of how to live on a given income of time instead of How to live on a given income of money. Money is far commoner than time. When one reflects, one perceives that money is just about the commonest thing there is. It encumbers the earth in gross heaps. If one can't contrive to live on a certain income of money, one earns a little more or steals it, or advertises for it. One doesn't necessarily muddle one's life because one can't manage on £1,000 a year. One braces the muscles and makes it guineas and balances the budget. But if one cannot arrange that an income of 24 hours a day shall exactly cover all proper items of expenditure, one does muddle one's life definitely. The supply of time, though gloriously regular, is cruelly restricted. Which of us lives on 24 hours a day? And when I say lives, I do not mean exists nor muddles through. Which of us is free from that uneasy feeling that the great spending departments of his daily life are not managed as they ought to be? Which of us is quite sure that his fine suit is not surmounted by a shameful hat, or that in attending to the crockery he has forgotten the quality of the food? Which of us is not saying to himself, which of us has not been saying to himself all his life, I shall alter, that when I have a little more time? We never shall have any more time. We have, and we have always had, all the time there is. 216, Semester 5, in these days, much of the profit, and sometimes the whole of, a casus depi, upon utilizing the odds and ends, the so-called byproducts. The FBI product is something apart from the main article manufactured, and yet something that has an actual value of its own. For instance, in the manufacture of gas there are many byproducts. These are obtained from the coal, as the latter is made into lighting gas. And these byproducts, including the coke from the coal, actually suffice to pay the cost of the gas. All kinds of big businesses have their byproducts, their little odds and ends that pay well. In Mr. Armour's enormous meat offerkey, for instance, there are endless byproducts, from the pigtails which are dried and sold as a delicacy, to the hair of animals, made into a powerful, valuable kind of rope. If Mr. Armour neglected the hair rope, or selling the pigtails, it would make a big difference in his dividends. The point for the reader is this: the individual law and does not manufacture as a rule. But we are, all of us, dealers in time. Time is the one thing we possess. Our success depends upon the use of our time and its byproduct, the odd moment. Each of us has a regular day's work that he does in a routine, more or less mechanical way. He does his clerking, his writing, his typewriting, or whatever it may be, so many hours per day, and that ends it. But what about the FBI product, the odd moments? Do you know that the men that have made great successes in this world are the men who have used wisely those odd moments? Thomas Edison, for instance, was hammering away at a telegraphy when he was telegraphatory on a small salary. He didn't neglect the FBI product, the odd moments. He thought and planned and tried between messages. And he worked out, as a byproduct of his telegraph job, all the inventions that have given him millions and given to the inhabitants of the world thousands of millions worth of dollars in new ideas. Benjamin Franklin, in his story of his life, shows an endless number of such efforts along the lines using the odd moments. In 100 different ways he managed to make the extra hours useful and productive. What a man does in his odd moments is not only apt to bring him profit, it is apt also to increase his mental activity. The mind craves a change, and it often does well the unusual thing out of the routine. Letting well enough alone is a foolish motto in the life of a man who wants to get ahead. In the first place, nothing is well. Lesson 22. 217. Enough if you can do better. No matter how well you are doing, do better. There is an old Spanish proverb which says, enjoy the little you have while the fool is hunting for more. The energetic American ought to turn this proverb upside down and make it read, while the fool is enjoying the little he has, I will hunt for more. The way to hunt for more is to utilize your odd moments. Every minute that you save by making it useful, more profitable, is so much added to your life and its possibilities. Every minute lost is a neglected byproduct gone. You will never get it back. Think of the odd quarter of an hour in the morning before breakfast, the odd half hour after breakfast. Remember the chance to read or figure or think with concentration on your own career that comes now and again in the day. All of these opportunities are the FBI products of your daily existence. Use them, and you may find what many of the greatest concerns have found, that the real profit is in the utilization of the byproducts. Among the aimless, unsuccessful, or worthless, you often hear talk about killing time. The man who is always killing time is really killing his own chances in life, while the man who is destined to success is the man who makes time live by making it useful. Can there possibly be a system for handling your job in such a manner that you would never have to suffer the ordeal of seeing work pile up on you? Alan Lakian, Lesson 23, How to Make the Most of Your Priorms. Tim Amenigent, the teaching of that subject has virtually become a growth industry. Everywhere you look, seminars are being conducted to instruct you on the finer aspects of swivel through better control of your time. Most of them have adopted and refined a brilliant technique for saving time that has been used profitably for more than half a century. When Charles Schwab was chairman of Bethlehem Steel, he was presented by Ivy Lee, a business consultant, with a simple plan that Mr. Lee guaranteed him would greatly increase the work productivity of every executive in Mr. Schwab's employ. All you need to do, advised Mr. Lee, is take a pad of paper this evening and list the most urgent projects which confront you. Then, study the list and number them, assigning number 1 to the most important job, number 2 to the next most vital, and so on down the list beginning tomorrow. Tackle number 1 and stay on it until it is finished, before you move on to number 2. Work on down the list. When the day is through, prepare a new list, again assigning top priority to the most important task still undone, and so on down the list. Do this every day, and after you discover how well it works, share it with your people. Several weeks later, Ivy Lee received a check for $25,000. 219-22, Semester 5. Alan Lakian has counseled corporations and their executives in the management of time for many years, numbering among his clients the Bank of America and IBM, as well as many celebrities in the field of entertainment. From his popular book, How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life, he will demonstrate how to clear your path to success by working exactly as some of America's top executives do. The main secret of getting more done every day took me several months of research to discover. When I first started delving into better time use, I asked successful people what the secret of their success was. I recall an early discussion with a vice president of Standard Oil Company of California who said, "Oh, I just keep a to-do list." I passed over that quickly, little suspecting at the time the importance of what he said. I happened to travel the next day to a large city to give a Tim Amenigent seminar. While I was there, I had lunch with a businessman who practically owned the town. He was chairman of the Gas and Light Company, president of 5 manufacturing companies, and had his hand in a dozen other enterprises. By all standards, he was a business success. I asked him the same question of how he managed to get more done, and he said, "Oh, Fetsy Sai, keep a to-do list." But this was a list with a difference. He told me he considered it a game. The first thing in the morning, he would come in and lay out his list of what he wanted to accomplish that day. In the evening, he would check to see how many of the items he had written down in the morning still remained and then give himself a score. His goal was to have a no-miss day in which every single item was crossed off. He played the to-do list game much as you cover the squares on a bingo card, getting items on his list done during the day as opportunities presented themselves, talking to someone on the phone, bringing up points at a meeting, exploring a creative project in the evening with his wife. He made sure to get started on the top priority items right away. Toward the end of the day, he initiated whatever calls, actions, or letters were necessary to finish up his bingo card for a perfect score. Lesson 23, 221. Again and again, when I talked to successful businessmen and government administrators, the to-do list came up. So during one of my seminars, I asked how many people had heard of keeping a priority list of things to do. Virtually everyone had. Then I asked how many people conscientiously made up a list of things to do every day, arranged the items in priority order, and crossed off each task as it was completed. I discovered that very few people keep a list of things to do every day, although most people occasionally make a to-do list when they are particularly busy, have a lot of things they want to remember to do, or pave some particularly tight deadline. Only a daily list will do. People at the top and people at the bottom both know about to-do lists, but one difference between them is that the people at the top use a to-do list every single day to make better use of their time. People at the bottom know about this tool but don't use it effectively. One of the real secrets of getting more done is to make a to-do list every day, keep it visible, and use it as a guide to action as you go through the day. Because the to-do list is such a fundamental time-planning tool, let's take a closer look at it. The basics of the list itself are: simple, head a piece of paper to do, Then list those items on which you want to work, cross off items as they are completed, and add others as they occur to you. Rewrite the list at the end of the day or when it becomes hard to read. One of the secrets to success is to write all your to-do items on a master list or lists to be kept together, rather than jotting down items on miscellaneous scraps of paper. You may want to keep your list in your appointment book. One executive keeps a special pad on his desk reserved for his to-do list. I know one woman who never buys a dress without a pocket in it so she can keep her to-do list always with her. Another homemaker was forever losing the lists she made. She spent more time looking for yesterday's list than she spent making today's. To help her get control of her time, I had her put all her lists in a notebook. She had the added benefit of being able to cull undone from previous lists. Some people try to keep to-do lists in their heads, but in my experience, this is rarely as effective. Why clutter your mind with things that can be written down? It's much better to leave your mind free for creative pursuits. 222. Semester 5. What belongs on the list? Are you going to write down everything you have to do, including routine activities? Are you only going to write down exceptional events? Are you going to put down everything you might do today, or only whatever you decided you will do today? There are many alternatives, and different people have different solutions. I recommend that you not list routine items but do list everything that has high priority today and might not get done without special attention. Don't forget to put the activates for your long-term goals on your to-do list. Although it may appear strange to see begin learning French or find new friends in the same list with bring home a quart of milk or buy birthday card, you want to do them in the same day. If you use your to-do list as a guide when deciding what to work on next, then you need the long-term projects represented too, so you won't forget them at decision time and consequently not do them. Before you even consider doing anything yourself, look over the list and see how many tasks you can delegate, not just to your subordinates or the babysitter, but to those at your level and even higher who do a job more quickly and easily, or who could suggest shortcuts you'd overlook. Depending on your responsibilities, you might, if you try hard enough, get all the items on your to-do list completed by the end of each day. If so, by all means try. But probably you can predict in advance that 3 is no way to do them all. When there are too many things to do, conscious choice as to what and what not to do is better than letting the decision be determined by chance. I cannot emphasize strongly enough you must set priorities. Some people do as many items as possible on their lists. They get a very high percentage of tasks done, but their effectiveness is low because the tasks they've done are mostly of priority. Others like to start at the top of the list and go right down it, again with little regard to its importance. The best way is to take your list and label each item according to act priority, delegate as much as you can, and then polish off the list accordingly. One person I know color codes the entries, using black for normal entries and red for top priority items. For people who have trouble living with priorities, I have found that it's helpful to use one piece of paper for the A's and B's and another page for the more numerous K's. The A and B paper is kept on top of the C, lesson 23. 223. List, and every time you raise the A and B list to do a C, you're aware that you're not making the best use of your time. Items on the to-do list may be arranged in several forms. One form is functional: to see, to telephone, to follow up, to think about, to decide, to dictate. Or you can group activities based on the similarity of the work content, everything about water pollution, the same location, several customers in one neighborhood, or the same person, several topics needing the boss opinion. You can have a single item on your to-do list represent a group, processing papers in your inbox, doing errands. Don't worry about completing your list. Now go down your list, doing all the A's before the B's and the B's before the K's. Some days you may get all the items on your list done, but more likely there will not be time to do them all. If you are doing them in ebb quarter, you may not even finish all the A's sometimes. On other days you will do the A's and B's, and on the other days as B's and some K's. One rarely reaches the bottom of a to-do list. It's not completing the list that counts, but making the best use of your time. If you find yourself with only B's and K's left, take a fresh look at possible activities and add to your list items such as revising your filing system for greater accessibility, finishing War and Peace, picking out a birthday present for your uncle as that were in the back of your mind but didn't make it to the original list. With a little extra time today, they can be started. Many office workers, homemakers, and professional people have come to my seminars because they felt the need to get organized. Most report a couple of months later that they feel much more organized simply because they regularly list and set priorities. For example, a newly appointed head nurse used the list instinct priorities approach for her home life after she had found how well it worked at the hospital. Good time use is as important off the job as on it. You don't want to turn your off work time into a work-like situation, but you can relax even more if those things you have to do are organized with the aid of a to-do list, then gotten out of the way quickly. If little things mean a lot, a list of things to do in priority order means a great deal because it provides you with the security of knowing that nothing is missing, an affirmation of all your important activities, a motivation to cross off items you don't need. 224. Semester Avenue, to do, and a reservoir from which you can select activities to be done next. By doing more as and fewer Ks, the hierarchy of your accomplishments will change. You can break up your old as into new as in Bs, downgrading your old Bs to Ks and dropping most of the old Ks off your list entirely. How to do more things that matter. For instance, a year ago, attending Parents' Day at your daughter's school would have been rated up. But now you're involved in a part-time fashion in business, and your daughter understands how busy you are and how much satisfaction you derive from your business, so you won't go to Parents' Day unless it's a slow time in your business. Last year you attended to every detail of the annual inventory yourself. Happily, while you were doing it, you recorded the necessary steps so that this year, with that reference guide in hand, last year's a figuring out what to do becomes this year's see following a routine. Now you are able to delegate the annual inventory to the new stock boy and use your time to merchandise your products better. The salesman who continually upgrades his customers finds that last year's 8-1 Inute customer is this year's C. Now, his a customer is a 5 Inute account, his B is a 25 Inute account. He upgraded his business this way by conscientiously going after the accounts. He spent more and more of his time with those who bought over 1, so gradually he was able to consider anyone below 1 to be a C. To encourage this continual upgrading, he went through his customer files each week and threw away at least one low-dollar prospect or customer. In my experience, most salesmen could benefit substantially by arbitrarily weeding out 2% of their customers in terms of present and potential volume. Learning a musical instrument is much the same. When you first play the piano, your is to practice easy pieces. Once you become proficient, it would be a C to continue playing them. So, you practice more and more difficult pieces. When you are learning a difficult piece, the E is to play it slowly but accurately, and the C to play it fast with what would likely be many mistakes. As you become more proficient in playing a passage, the E becomes playing the passage at its correct tempo. In learning and applying time use skills, it may be in a 2. Watch how to spend every 5 minutes for an hour so that you become much more aware of time use. Once you become automat, lesson 23. 225. Equally aware of time use. It is a C even to think about time passing, unless you want to sharpen up that skill again. The good time user has a constant stream of us going through the pipeline and is not hung up on which to do or how to do it or trying to be a perfectionist about a particular. Rather, he does a number of 8 tasks daily and remembers that as soon as he has identified the best use of his time, the time to do it is now. The ultimate goal of a more effective and efficient life is to provide you with enough time to enjoy some of it. Michael LaBeouf, Lesson 24, How to Get Yourself Organized. William Faulkner once lamented that the saddest thing in life is that the only thing we can do for 8 hours a day, day after day, is work. We can't eat for 8 tillers a day, or drink for 8 hours a day, or make love for 8 hours a day. All that we can do for that long a period, he said, is work, which is the reason man makes himself and everybody else so miserable and unhappy. Researcher and consultant Michael LaBeouf conducts invaluable seminars teaching people how to make the most of their time and their effort so that even their working hours can be free of crisis and unhappiness. In his brilliant book, Working Smart, from which this lesson is taken, he asks, what does work mean to you? Do you think of it as an activity that takes more from you than it gives you? Do you think of the distinction between play and work as that between pleasure and pain? Do you live to work? Do you work to live? Regardless of your answers, one thing is certain: work is here to stay. If you have decided to use Alan Lake's to-do us technique from your last lesson, you have already made a major move toward removing much of the chaos and hassle that comes with every job. Unfortunately, Although you may have the greatest to-do ust in the world each morning, you just might never get around to crossing even that first item off your list if you are disorganized. 227, 228. Semester 5, and having little to show for your efforts at the end of a hard day produces frustration, exhaustion, and worse. Not to Woney. Mr. LaBeouf is about to show you how to get your act together, an important step on that yellow brick road to success. In one of his Philness, W.C. Fields plays an executive whose desk is a morass of clutter. In one scene, he returns to his desk to find that an efficiency expert has organized, rearranged, and streamlined it. The desktop is now a picture of neatness and efficiency, but Fields is frustrated. He can't find any filling, so he vigorously throws the neat stacks of paper up in the air, tossing them in the way a gourmet would a salad. Then he backs off, surveys the desk, top with satisfaction, deftly reaches into the pile-up and pulls out the desired document. To fully appreciate the satire of that scene, we should place it in historical perspective. At the time Fields was in his glory, efficiency experts were preaching the gospel of organization. One of the cardinal sins of an efficiency was to have a desk that had anything on top of it other than the immediate work at hand. A clear desk was heralded as the badge of efficiency and productivity. Today, we are less sure of this. Certainly, a life of organization is usually a great deal more effective than one of chaos. Most of us could enhance our effectiveness with more organization. However, hard and fast rules are not the order of the day when it comes to organizing. This is what W.C. Fields was trying to tell us in the film. We all must organize to suit our own personality and the task at hand. As you plan your life, resist the temptation of becoming overly organized. It's an effectiveness killer. I had a friend in college who flunked out after a semester. The main reason was that he spent all his study time reading various books on how to study and never got around to studying. The same problem can arise as you try to work smarter. Remember, these ideas are merely means to an end, and that end is to increase your lifetime effectiveness. Running around with a stopwatch and keeping a totally clear desk isn't going to accomplish what you want in life. Nevertheless, there are some good guidelines for organizing your life and your thoughts. If you practice these guidelines as 229, Lesson 24, guidelines rather than hard and fast rules, you will find they will aid you in getting the most from your time and effort. With that thought in mind, let's look at a few of them. Get the proper tools to do the job. Thomas Carlyle once remarked, "Man is a tool-using animal. Without tools he is nothing, with tools he is all." Those are words worth remembering. How many times have you labored at an unsuccessful activity only to find out that having a particular tool could have saved you a great deal of time, energy, and frustration? This type of experience is usually most apparent to us when we are trying to repair the family car or something around the house. This is because we tend to think of tools as tangible instruments, as many of them are. However, to make the most of this guideline, we have to use the word tool in a much broader context. A tool is anything you use to help you achieve your goals. No matter what your goals or what activities you pursue, all of them involve tools. If you are an accountant, your tools include the obvious pencils, papers, and calculators, as well as your certificate and your practical knowledge. If you work in an office, the office itself with its DK chair and floor space is a tool. Other examples of less obvious tools are automobiles, statistical tables, newspapers, foreign languages, and interviewing techniques. The list is endless. Before setting out to perform a task or achieve a goal, stop and ask yourself, what are the necessary tools to complete the task successfully, and do I have them? If you don't have the proper tools, first consider getting someone else to do the job. Your time, energy, and expenses may be greatly reduced by employing someone else. However, if it's something only you can do, make an effort to first equip yourself with the best tools available. The difference between wise men and fools is often found in their choice of tools. Organize your workspace. Consider the environment in which you will be performing the task. Organizing your workspace is largely a personal matter that depends on your own tastes and the job to be done. However, there are several basic factors to keep in mind. 23 Semester 5.1 Location. If you are fortunate enough to choose your workspace, choose one that is conducive to performing the task. If the job requires concentration, look for a quiet, private place. On the other hand, if you are opening your own business choose a well-traveled location where potential customers have easy access to your establishment. 2. Space. After you have chosen the proper work location, measure how much space you have to work with. Most of us usually find we have less than we want. It helps to know what space is available before furnishing it with the necessary tools. 3. Easy access to the tools you use frequently. It helps here to make a list of the tools you use or rank them in order of how often you use them. Then you will have a guide to arranging them for easiest access. Refrain from cluttering your workspace with non-essential items. The moose head you had mounted after your last hunting trip to Canada may well be a sight worth seeing, but if it distracts you, you should place it somewhere else. Besides, it may occupy space where a more useful tool such as a memo board could be put. 4. Comfort. Some people don't believe that workspaces should be designed for comfort. They are generally people who play the hard work tape or the work expansionist in tape. The fact is that discomfort is a distraction that serves only to hinder productivity. Why make things more difficult than they have to be? Life is already filled with a more than ample supply of discomforts, distractions, and frustrations. A comfortable workspace generally has the proper seating, ventilation, and lighting. If you work sitting down for long periods, choose a firm, comfortable chair that gives good back support. Try to find one comfortable enough that you won't have to get up every 10 minutes, but not so comfortable that you will fall asleep in it. To avoid eye strain, use indirect, uniform lighting. Adequate ventilation will help prevent unnecessary fatigue from stuff-ins in the work environment. Which temperature range you work best in is a personal matter. However, be sure to locate your place in the workspace out of a draft. Master the art of deskmanship. A great many of us perform some or all of our work at a desk. As I mentioned earlier, a desk is a tool, and it is one of the most, Lesson 24, 231, abused and misused of tools. So before delving into the application of this tool and how to get the most from it, we ought to consider what a desk is not. Specifically, a desk is not 1. A place to conduct a paper drive. Judging from the many cluttered desktops I've seen, I'm convinced that paper recyclers would fare better if they raided desktops in office buildings rather than collecting old newspapers from the local shopping center. 2. A storage depot for food, clothing, umbrellas, and other non-job sundries. I once moved into an office only to find I was sharing a desk with a colony of ants. It seems that my predecessor had willed me a large open bag of candy in the top right-hand drawer, but the clever little devils had beaten me to it. 3. A place to stack items you want to remember. A German executive once remarked to Alec Mackenzie that desktops get stacked because we put things there we don't want to forget. The problem is that it gurks. Every time we look up, we see all these things we don't want to forget, and our mind wanders, breaking our train of thought. With time, the stacks grow higher and we forget what's in each one. So we waste large amounts of time retrieving lost items and thinking about all those things we don't want to forget. Merrill Douglas's, a time management consultant, tells of keeping a close time log on one executive who had a stacked desk. The log revealed that he spent 2.5 hours per day looking for information on the top of his desk. 4. A status symbol or place to display awards, trophies, and the like. This mistaken use of desks causes us only to make desks larger than they have to be. With more surface area we have here room for clutter, and somehow more clutter magically appears to fill up any available space. Now that we have discussed what a desk is not, let's look at what a desk is. It's a tool that expedites the receiving and processing of information and should be utilized with those objectives in mind. You may have a desk and not need one. Lawrence Sapley, former president of the American Management Association, remarked that most desks only read decisions. Some executives have thrown out their desks and declared their effectiveness has increased. They have replaced the standard office desk and chair with a lounge chair, clipboard, small writing table on casters, and file cabinets. Advocates of the deskless office report an improvement in face-to-face communication and an atmosphere of greater free. 232. Semester 5. Dom. They no longer feel chained to a desk. Consider the possibility that you may not need a desk, and if you can get rid of it, try working without it and see what happens. How to reorganize your desk for effectiveness. Assuming you do need your desk, you may want to embark on a reorganization project. If you decide to reorganize your desk, block out several hours in your schedule when you won't be interrupted. Desk reorganization is a good Saturday morning project and can be accomplished by the following procedure. 1. Get a large trash can. 2. Take everything off the top of the desk and empty all drawers. Discard every item that is no longer of any use. 3. Make a list of all the remaining items that were in or on your desk and rank them in order of importance. When you consider each item, ask yourself, what's the worst thing that will happen if I throw this away? If the answer isn't very bad, throw away the item and leave it off the list. 4. Critically view all the non-discarded items and put only the most essential ones in your desk. Articles that you don't need immediate access to should be stored somewhere else, such as in a file cabinet or bookcase. 5. Make a filing system in the deep drawers with files well labeled and organized for quick and easy access. Periodically review all of your desk files and keep only the current essential ones in your desk. Over 90% of all files over 1 year old are never referred to. 6. To use the irrepudiable principle for processing information, get to large stacking file basketstone to store incoming work and one for storing work you have processed and are ready to send on. Pending items of low priority or needing later attention may be filed in the desk drawer as long as the drawers are regularly monitored. Guidelines for working at a desk. If you have gone to the trouble of reorganizing your desk, you have taken a giant step toward making your desk a more effective tool. Some find it helpful to repeat desk reorganization every 6 months. The following guidelines are designed to increase your desk work effectiveness by reducing the amount of clutter. 1. Have only one project at a time on top of your desk. It should be your top priority for the moment. Lesson 24, 233. 2. Keep items off your desk until you are ready for them. Store them in file cabinets or drawers, but get them out of sight. 3. Don't allow yourself to be sidetracked by other tasks because they are easier or more appealing. You should work on the top priority item and keep at it until it is completed. 4. When you complete a task, put it in the out basket and send it on its way. Then check your priorities and move on to the next item. 5. If you have one, a secretary can help by keeping your desk clear and seeing that the day's top priority item is waiting on your desk at the beginning of each day. As I pointed out earlier, these are merely guidelines and they may not be suitable for you. Making a fetish out of a clean desk isn't going to get the job done, and for some it becomes just another detractor from effectively doing the job. Choose a style suitable for you and the work to be done, but be honest with yourself. Few of us do our best work with a heavily cluttered and disorganized desk. Improve your ability to concentrate. Concentration in any form is an amazing phenomenon. As a 6-year-old, I was spellbound when one of my friends ignited a piece of paper by focusing the sun's rays on the paper through a magnifying glass. Our own time and energy are much like the sun's rays. To the degree that we concentrate our efforts, we will succeed in getting what we want out of life. The ability to concentrate has enabled many men of modest capabilities to reach heights of success that have often eluded geniuses. Think with a pencil in your hand. When you write down your ideas, you automatically focus your full attention on them. Few, if any of us, can write one thought and think another at the same time. Thus, a pencil and paper make excellent concentration tools. Whenever you need to concentrate, make it a habit to think with a pencil in your hand. As ideas come to you, jot them down. As you write down ideas, you will automatically be thinking them through and clarifying them in your mind. Soon you will have a list of thoughts to consider. You will be much more likely to see which. 234. Semester 5. Ideas are irrational, erroneous, or in conflict with each other if you can view them all at once. Reserve your workplace exclusively for work. We are all creatures of habit, and most of our behavior involves little or no thought. We learn to associate certain behavior with a given environment. If we don't take pains to develop good habits in the work environment, all sorts of unproductive ones can develop and rob us of our time and energy. One way to improve your ability to concentrate is to reserve your workplace only for working. For example, if you work behind a desk in an office, don't do anything at your desk unrelated to work. If a visitor drops in, get up and move away from the desk. If you allow yourself to socialize behind the desk, you will come to associate that location as more than a work location. When you take a break, move away from where you work. Sit in another chair or go to another room. If you develop the habit of choosing a certain spot to work, you will find yourself getting down to business much more rapidly and automatically when it's time to work. Slow down and stop. Constructively, one of the keys to the art of staying with a task is in knowing how and when to back off. Blind perseverance is for fools. It involves working harder rather than smarter. When you find yourself mentally blocked from solving problems, make a tactical retreat from your work. Pushing ahead will only lead to confusion and frustration. Perhaps you need to get more input about the task or need more time to digest and integrate information. When you have to quit working, there are several things you can do to make your work more enjoyable and productive when you start back. 1. Try to end your work on a high note. If you quit at a point of satisfaction, you will tend to think of the work as gratifying and be more eager to return to it. 2. Try to stop at a point of accomplishment. 3. If you quit at a point where you are stalled, write down the problem and try to clarify what's blocking your progress. 4. Have a logical starting point at which to resume. This will reduce your startup time when you return to the task. Lesson 24. 235. Improve your follow-worth. Knowing when to stop is a good tactical maneuver, but it doesn't get the job done. Somewhere along the line you must tackle the task and follow through to completion. Here are some ideas that you will find helpful in successfully finishing what you start. 1. Get interested in your work. Interest and motivation go together like Siamese twins. Get more information. The more you know about something, the greater the odds you will become absorbed in it. 2. Try to imagine the satisfaction that will come from seeing the task achieved. Think of how much better you'll look after you've shed those 20 pounds, or how much better you'll feel when you quit smoking. Think of the better job you will have and the happier life you'll lead when you finally get that degree or that promotion. 3. Challenge yourself with deadlines for completion. 4. Try to shield yourself from interruptions and distractions. 5. Take part in a joint effort with someone else who is dependable. When you make a commitment to do something with someone else, you are more likely to do the job than if you tackle it alone. When I was in graduate school, we would study in groups or pairs to reinforce our commitment to learn. We called it cooperate and graduate. The important thing is that each person be dependable. If both parties are committed, each can set the pace for the other. Improve your memory. One of our greatest time and energizing tools is our memory. Without a memory, all of our learning would be useless. We would have to respond to every situation as if we had never experienced it. We use our memories to learn to walk, talk, absorb facts, solve problems, drive cars, read, and do numerous other things. The uses and capacity of the human memory are a miracle. You can store more bits of information in your 2-pound brain than in today's most advanced computers. Unfortunately, storing information is one thing and retrieving it is another. This is where the computer is our superior. However, most of us can improve our ability to store and retrieve information if we understand how our memory works and apply some simple concepts of memory improvement. 236, Semester 5. Your memory is not a thing, it's a test of skills. It can't be seen, felt, examined, or weighed. Memory skills are generally divided into 3 stages. 1. Remembering, leaving the information to be stored. 2. Recording, storing the material in the brain until needed. 3. Retrieving, getting the material out when needed. This final stage is the cause of our greatest problems. How many times have you said to yourself, "It's on the tip of my tongue"? We can do little or nothing to improve our retrieval ability per Southeast. However, our ability to retrieve is somewhat dependent on how we record information, and we can improve our memory by modifying our methods of recording. Briefly, here are some guidelines to aid you in making the most of your memory. 1. Commit things to memory when you are rested. You try to memorize when you are fatigued. You will most likely find it frustrating. 2. Break down lists into smaller, manageable units and subcategories before trying to memorize them. You have to learn the capital cities of 2 nations, break them up into 5 groups of 4 or 6 groups of 3, and 1 group of 2. 3. Repeat the material to yourself several times. Writing the material also helps. 4. Space your learning into several periods. Begin each new period by reviewing what you have previously memorized to keep it firmly planted in your memory. 5. Relate material you are learning to familiar ideas, persons, symbols, and other things that are already firmly planted in your memory. For example, you can probably recall roughly what the map officially looks like, because it's shaped like a boot. Can you do the same for Yugoslavia? 6. Arrange ideas to be learned into a formula system or code word to aid your recall. For example, advertising teachers use the code word AIDA for arouse attention, create interest, stimulate, desire, and move to action. Another example is the 5-step study method called SCA3, which stands for survey, question, read, recite, review. 7. Use spare moments, such as waiting time, for memorizing. Carry note cards in your pocket for quick and sly referral. I used those 7 guidelines to overcome my two greatest memory senges. In order to get my Ph.D. degree, I had to pass exams in translating to foreign languages, French and German, into English. I had had no previous exposure to German, and the French I knew was limited to spelling my name and reading New Orleans street signs. Nevertheless, I passed both of those tests 6, lesson 24, 237 weeks after starting from scratch. I started out by buying the appropriate vocabulary cards, 1,000 of them, and a set of graded readers. Each day I read for 1 hour in the reader and learned 30 new words from the vocabulary cards. Before learning new words, I would review the words previously learned to reinforce my recall. At the end of 5 weeks, I had learned all 1,000 words, and my reading and translating proficiency was well underway. The last week was reserved for polishing and reviewing. I passed both exams with flying colors. If you use some of the modern memory aids, known as mnemonics, you will be able to amaze yourself and others with memory feats. With proper training, almost anyone can learn to look through a shuffled deck of cards and remember them in order, meet 50 people and instantly recall their names, or recall over 100 phone numbers. If you want more information on memory improvement, there are several good books on the subject, including Dr. Kenneth Higbee's Your Memory. Deal with trivia in batches. All of us are plagued with a number of necessary minor tasks that must be done in the near future. Examples of these are paying bills, running errands, shopping, housework, yard work, minor repairs, correspondence, reading, and making telephone calls. Attacking these tasks in a random fashion is one sure way to work more and accomplish less. One way to keep trivia from hindering your effectiveness is to organize the tasks into batches and handle a batch at a time. Try to run several errands at one time. Go to the grocery, bank, car, wash, and filling station in one trip. Do several household chores in sequence, or combine several if possible. Save up your bills and pay them all at a certain time each month. Try to make telephone calls and write letters in batches. Trivia sessions are an effective method of preventing the minor things in your life from hindering your accomplishment of major goals. Problem-shaping strategy, as you realize by now, planning and goal setting are basically a process of decision-making, and decision-making is problem-solving. Organizing your approach to a problem puts you halfway toward solving it. The following general guidelines will help you achieve a basic readiness to meet and penetrate all roadblocks to success. 238, Semester 5. Don't needlessly complicate your problems. We live in an age of technological sophistication with trips to the moon, electronic brains, and nuclear power. Complexity is the norm. As a result, we have come to expect complexity in all facets of life. There appears to be an unwritten rule in our society that nothing has the right to be simple anymore. All too often, when given the choice between a simple and complex solution to a problem, many of us opt for the latter. The story of using 5 men to change a light bulb, 1 to hold the bulb and 4 to turn the man on the ladder, makes us chuckle. But like most good humor, it carries an underlying message containing some truth. As you try to solve a problem, look first for a simple, satisfactory solution. It may save you a great deal of time. Approach the problem creatively. Often our problem-shaping ability is hindered by being locked into a particular way of viewing the problem. Many of us have heard the story of the truck being stuck in an underpass. A team of engineers was called out to decide how to dislodge the truck. True to their profession, they took an engineering approach to solving the problem and began making a series of complex stress calculations. A small boy standing by asked one of the engineers, "Hey, mister, why don't you let the air out of the tires?" Immediately, the problem was solved. The more ways we allow ourselves to view a problem, the better the odds of our finding a satisfactory solution. Alex F. Osborne, advertising genius, has a checklist for new ideas to stimulate your creative abilities. You may find the checklist helpful, as I have, when confronted with problem solving. Could we? 1. Modify. What to add more time, greater frequency, stronger, higher, longer, thicker, duplicate, multiply, exaggerate. 2. Minimize. What to subtract, smaller, condense, omit, streamline, split up, lower, shorten, lighten. Lesson 24. 239. 3. Substitute. Other process, ingredient, material, other place, other approach or form of approach. 4. Rearrange. Interchange components. Other sequence, schedule, pattern, layout, other person. 5. Reverse. Transpose positive and negative, try opposite, turn backward or upside down, reverse roles. 6. Combine. Uses, purposes, ideas, approaches. 7. Put to other uses. New ways to use, other uses if modified. WHTL says like this. William James once said, genius means little more than the faculty of perceiving in an unhabitual way. Whether you choose to use Osborne's checklist, brainstorm, or whatever, it generally helps to try and see things from a different perspective. Distinguish between urgency and importance. When Dwight Eisenhower became president, he tried to arrange his administration so that only urgent and important matters were called to his attention. Everything else was to be delegated to lower echelons. However, he discovered that urgency and importance seldom appear together. This concept also applies to our lives. Important things are seldom urgent, and urgent things are seldom important. The urgency of fixing a flat tire when you are late for an appointment is much greater than remembering to pay your auto insurance premium, but its importance is, in most cases, relatively small. Unfortunately, many of us spend our lives fighting fires under the tyranny of the urgent. The result is that we ignore the less urgent but more important things in life. It's a great effectiveness killer. When you are faced with a number of problems to solve, ask yourself which are the important ones and make them your first priority. If you allow yourself to be governed by the tyranny of the urgent, your life will be one crisis after another. You'll be very active and may even be the busiest beaver around. However, 24. Semester 5, someday you may wake up to find you've been building your dam on an empty lake. Try to anticipate potential crises. Doctors tell us that the best medicine is preventive medicine. You don't have to concern yourself with curing an illness if you don't have it. Thus, you take precautionary measures designed to maintain your health, such as getting enough rest, proper diet, exercise, vaccines, and so on. General troubleshooting operates in much the same way. If you anticipate crises and take steps to prevent or deal with them, you will be wisely investing your time. Things seldom evolve to the crisis level without some warning. A little foresight and preventive maintenance can ensure that you spend your time achieving your goals rather than react to crises. Put our subconscious to work. Some of our greatest troubleshooting ability lies somewhere beneath our level of awareness. Often we have trouble coming up with solutions to problems simply because we are pressing ourselves too hard for an answer. The anxiety and tension we create by agonizing for a solution cripple our creative abilities, as well as needlessly wasting time. Some years ago, when I first entered graduate school, I agonized over what I would choose to write my doctoral thesis on. Although I wouldn't need to decide for at least 2 years, the thought of a thesis topic plagued me because I had never done one before. The idea of additional coursework and examinations was of no worry. I had been through all that before and felt confident of capable performance. The more I pressed myself for a topic, the more anxious I became, and my thesis topic ideas remained nil. One day I mentioned this to one of my professors, and he suggested that I simply forget about it and concentrate on the work at hand. Turn the problem over to your subconscious, he said, and let it work for you. When you get ready to tackle that thesis, your subconscious will have a topic for you. Most important decisions are usually made at the subconscious level. I took his advice, and it really worked. 6 months before I was ready to tackle the thesis, a topic idea carped to me. The value of subconscious decision-making was one of the greatest lessons I learned in graduate school. When you truly understand this lesson, you will be as close as you can possibly get to a single universal law of success. Dr. Napoleon Hill, Lesson 25, How to Use the Law of Increasing Returns. Napoleon Hill was an incredible man. Against great odds and pressures, he devoted more than 25 years of his life to interviewing and researching the careers of achievers. His goal, to isolate and define the reasons why so many fail and so few succeed. Hundreds of thousands of success books have appeared in the past 5 decades, and yet The vast majority of them all have roots that can be traced back to the findings of Dr. Hill. Undoubtedly, his all-time bestseller, Think and Grow Rich, has affected more lives in this century than any other book except the Bible. Think and Grow Rich, however, was only a condensed version of an earlier work of Hill in 16 languages, entitled The Laws of Success. It was such a monumental work that it contained priceless testimonials from Thomas Edison, Cyrus Curtis, William Howard Taft, Woodrow Wilson, William Wrigley Jr., John Wanamaker, George Eastman, and F.W. Woolworthy. Your lesson has been taken from the original book, and its subject, according to Dr. Hill, will, of itself, practically ensure success to anyone who will practice it in all they do. He wrote, "You may not like the work in which you are now engaged. There are two ways of getting out of that work. One way is to take but little interest in what you are doing, aiming merely to do enough with which to get by. Very soon you will find a way out, because the demand for your services will cease. But there is another and better way for you to get out of that work you don't like, and the greatest success writer of them all is about to explain how." 241, 242. Semester 5. When a man is engaged in work that he loves, it is no hardship for him to do more work and better work than that for which he is paid, and for this very reason every man owes it to himself to do his best to find the sort of work he likes best. I have a perfect right to offer this advice to the students of this philosophy for the reason that I have followed it myself, without reason to regret having done so. This seems to be an appropriate place to inject a little personal history concerning both the author and the law of success philosophy, the purpose of which is to show that labor performed in a spirit of love for the sake of the labor itself never has been and never will be lost. This entire lesson is devoted to the offering of evidence that it really pays to render more service and better service than one is paid to render. What an empty and useless effort this would be if the author had not himself practiced this rule long enough to be able to say just how it works out. For over a quarter of a century I have been engaged in the labor of love out of which this philosophy has been developed, and I am perfectly sincere when I repeat that I have been amply paid for my labors by the pleasure I have had as I went along, even if I received nothing more. My labors on this philosophy made it necessary, many years ago, for me to choose between immediate monetary returns, which I might have enjoyed by directing my efforts along purely commercial lines, and remuneration that comes in later years, and which is represented by both the usual financial standards and other forms of pay which can be measured only in terms of accumulated knowledge that enables one to enjoy the world about him more keenly. The man who engages in work that he loves best does not always have the support, his choice of his closest friends and relatives. Combating negative suggestions from friends and relatives has required an alarming proportion of my energies during the years that I have been engaged in research work for the purpose of gathering, organizing, classifying, and testing the material which has gone into my writings and courses. Lesson 25, 243. These personal references are made solely for the purpose of showing the students of this philosophy that seldom, if ever, can one hope to engage in the work one loves best without meeting with obstacles of some nature. Generally, the chief obstacles in the way of one engaging in the sort of work one loves best is that it may not be the work which brings the greatest remuneration at the start. To offset this disadvantage, however, the one who engages in the sort of work he loves is generally rewarded with two very decided benefits, namely, first, he usually finds in such work the greatest of all rewards, happiness, which is priceless, and secondly, his actual reward in money, when averaged over a lifetime of effort, is generally much greater, for the reason that labor which is performed in a spirit of love is usually greater in quantity and finer in quality than that which is performed solely for money. Please keep in mind that during all these years of research I was not only applying the law covered by this lesson, by doing more than paid for, but I was going much further than this by doing work for which I did not, at the time I was doing it, hope ever to receive pay. Thus, out of years of chaos, adversity, and opposition, this philosophy was finally completed and reduced to manuscripts, ready for publication. There are more than a score of sound reasons why you should develop the habit of performing more service and better service in that for which you are paid, despite the fact that a large majority of the people are not rendering such service. There are two reasons, however, for rendering such service, which stranded, in importance, all the others, namely, fire it by establishing a reputation as being a person who always renders more service and better service than that for which you are paid, you will benefit by comparison with those around you who do not render such service, and the contrast will be so noticeable that there will be keen competition for your services, no matter what your life work may be. It would be an insult to your intelligence to offer proof of the soundness of this statement, because it is obviously sound. Whether you are preaching sermons, practicing law, writing books, teaching school, or digging ditches, you will become more valuable, and you will be able to command greater pay the minute you gain recognition as a person who does more than that for which he is paid. Second, by far the most important reason why you should render more service than that for which you are paid, a reason that is basic and fundamental in nature, may be described in this way. 244. Semester 5. Suppose that you wished to develop a strong right hand, and suppose that you tried to do so by tying the end to your side with a rope, thus taking it out of use and giving it a long rest. Would disuse bring strength, or would it bring atrophy and weakness, resulting, finally, in your being compelled to have the hand removed? You know that if you wished a strong right, and you could develop such an only by giving it the hardest sort of use. Take a look at the hand of a blacksmith if you wish to know how an hand may be made strong. Out of resistance comes strength. The strongest oak tree of the forest is not the one that is protected from the storm and hidden from the sun, but it is the one that stands in the open, where it is compelled to struggle for its existence against the winds and rains and the scorching sun. It is through the operation of one of nature's unvarying laws that struggle and resistance develop strength, and the purpose of this lesson is to show you how to harness this law, and so use it that it will aid you in your struggle for success. By performing more service and better service than that for which you are paid, you not only exercise your service-doing qualities, and thereby develop skill and ability of an extraordinary sort, but you build reputation that is valuable. If you form the habit of rendering such service, you will become so adept in your work that you can command greater remuneration than those who do not perform such service. You will eventually develop sufficient strength to enable you to remove yourself from any undesirable station in life, and no one can or will desire to stop you. If you are an employee, you can make yourself so valuable through this habit of performing more service than that for which you are paid, that you can practically set your own wags, and no sensible employer will try to stop you. If your employer should be so unfortunate as to try to withhold from you the compensation to which you are entitled, this will not long remain as a handicap, because other employers will discover this unusual quality and offer you employment. The very fact that most people are rendering as little service as they can possibly get by with serves as an advantage to all who are rendering more service than that for which they are paid, because it enables all who do this to profit by comparison. You can get by if you render as little service as possible, but that is all you will get, and when work is slack and retrenchment sets in, you will be one of the first to be dismissed. For more than 25 years I have carefully studied men with the object of ascertaining why some achieve noteworthy. Lesson 25. 245. Success while others with just as much ability do not get ahead, and it seems significant that every person whom I have observed, applying this principle of rendering more service than that for which he was paid, was holding a better position and receiving more pay than those who merely performed sufficient service to get by with. Personally, I never received a promotion in my life that I could not trace directly to recognition that I had gained by rendering more service and better service than that for which I was paid. I am stressing the importance of making this principle a habit as a means of enabling an employee to promote himself to a higher position with greater pay, for the reason that this will be studied by thousands of young men and young women who work for others. However, the principle applies to the employer or to the professional man or woman just the same as to the employee. Observance of this principle brings a twofold reward. First, it brings the reward of greater material gain than that enjoyed by those who do not observe it, and second, it brings that reward of happiness and satisfaction which come only to those who render such service. You receive no pay except that which comes in your pay envelope. You are underpaid, no matter how much money that envelope contains. We will now analyze the law upon which this entire lesson is founded, namely, the law of increasing returns. Let us begin our analysis by showing how nature employs this law in behalf of the tillers of the soil. The farmer carefully prepares the ground, then sows his wheat and waits while the law of increasing returns brings back the seed he has sown, plus a manifold increase. But for this law of increasing returns, man would perish, because he could not make the soil produce sufficient food for his existence. There would be no advantage to be gained by sowing a field of wheat if the harvest yield did not return more than was sown. With this vital tip from nature, which we may gather from the wheat fields, let us proceed to appropriate this law of increasing returns and learn how to apply it to the service we render, to the end that it may yield returns in excess of and out of proportion to the effort put forth. 246, Semester 5. First of all, let us emphasize the fact that there is no trickery or chicanery connected with this law, although quite a few seem not to have learned this great truth, judging by the number who spend all of their efforts either trying to get something for nothing or something for less than its true value. It is to no such end that we recommend the use of the law of increasing returns, for no such end is possible within the broad meaning of the word success. Another remarkable and noteworthy feature of the law of increasing returns is the fact that it may be used by those who purchase service with as great returns as it can be by those who render service, for proof of which we have but to study the effects of Henry Ford's famous 5-at-a-wology minimum wage scale, which he inaugurated some years ago. Those who are familiar with the facts say that Mr. Ford was not playing the part of a philanthropist when he inaugurated this minimum wage scale, but, to the contrary, he was merely taking advantage of a sound business principle which has probably yielded him greater returns in both dollars and goodwill than any other single policy ever inaugurated at the Ford plant. By paying more wages than the average, he received more service and better service than the average. At a single stroke, through the inauguration of that minimum wage policy, Ford attracted the best labor on the market and placed a premium upon the privilege of working in his plant. I have no authentic figures at hand bearing on the subject, but I have sound reason to conjecture that for every $5 Ford spent under this policy, he received at least $7.50 worth of service. I have, also, sound reason to believe that this policy enabled Ford to reduce the cost of supervision, because employment in his plant became so desirable that no worker would care to run the risk of losing his position by soldiering on the job or rendering poor service, where other employers were forced to depend upon costly supervision in order to get the service to which they were entitled, and for which they were paying. Ford got the same or better service by the less expensive method of placing a premium upon employment in his plant. Marshall Field was probably the leading merchant of his time, and the great Field store in Chicago stands today as a monument to his ability to apply the law of increasing returns. A customer purchased an expensive lace waist at the Field store, but did not wear it. 2 years later, she gave it to her niece, Lesson 25, 247, as a wedding present. The niece quietly returned the waist to the Field store and exchanged it for other merchandise, despite the fact that it had been out for more than 2 years and was then out of style. Not only did the Field store take back the waist, but, what is of more importance, it did so without argument. Of course, there was no obligation, moral or legal, on the part of the store to accept the return of the waist at that late date, which makes the transaction all the more significant. The waist was originally priced at $50, and of course, it had to be thrown on the bargain counter and sold for whatever it would bring, but the keen student of human nature will understand that the Field store not only did not lose anything on the waist, but it actually profited by the transaction to an extent that cannot be measured in mere dollars. The woman who returned the waist knew that she was not entitled to a rebate, therefore, when the store gave her that too, which she was not entitled, the transaction won her as a permanent customer. But the effect of the transaction did not end here, it only began, for this woman spread the news of the fair treatment she had received at the Field store far and near. It was the talk of the women of her set for many days, and the Field store received more advertising from the transaction than it could have purchased in any other way with 10 times the value of the waist. The success of the Field store was built largely upon Marshall Field's understanding of the law of increasing returns, which prompted him to adopt, as a part of his business policy, the slogan, "The customer is always right." When you do only that for which your car paid, there is nothing out of the ordinary to attract favorable comment about the transaction, but when you willingly do more than that for which you are paid, your action attracts the favorable attention of all who are affected by the transaction, and goes another step toward establishing a reputation that will eventually set the law of fin-brixing returns to work in your behalf, for this reputation will create a demand for your services far and wide. Carroll Downs went to work for W.C. Durant, the automobile manufacturer, in a minor position. He is now Mr. Durant's right-hand man and the president of one of his automobile distributing companies. He promoted himself into this profitable position solely through the aid of the law of increasing returns, which he put into operation by rendering more service and better service than that for which he was paid. 248, Semester 5. In a recent visit with Mr. Downs, I asked him to tell me how he managed to gain promotion so rapidly. In a few brief sentences, he told the whole story. When I first went to work with Mr. Durant, said he, I noticed that he always remained at the office long after all the others had gone home for the day, and I made it my business to stay there also. No one asked me to stay, but I thought someone should be there to give Mr. Durant any assistance he might need. Often he would look around for someone to bring him a letter file, or render some other trivial service, and always he found me there, ready to serve him. He got into the habit of calling on me, that is, about all there is to the story. He got into the habit of calling on me. Read that sentence again, for it is full of meaning of the richest sort. Why did Mr. Durant get into the habit of calling on Mr. Downs? Because Mr. Downs made it his business to be on hand, where he would be seen. He deliberately placed himself in Mr. Durant's way in order that he might render service that would place the law of increasing returns back of him. Was he told to do this? No. Was he paid to do it? Yes. He was paid by the opportunity it offered for him to bring himself to the attention of the man who had it within his power to promote him. We are now approaching the most important part of this lesson, because this is an appropriate place at which to suggest that you have the same opportunity to make use of the law of increasing returns that Mr. Downs had, and you can go about the application of the law in exactly the same way that he did, by being on hand and ready to volunteer your services in the performance of work which others may shirk because they are not paid to do it. Stop. Don't say it. Didn't even think it if you have the slightest intention of springing that old time-worn phrase entitled, but my employer is different. Of course he is different. All men are different in most respects, but they are very much alike in thirty, are somewhat selfish. In fact, they are selfish enough not to want a man such as Carol Downs to cast his lot with their competitor, and this very selfishness may be made to serve you as an asset and not as a liability, if you have the good judgment to make yourself so useful that the person to whom you sell your services cannot get along without you. Lesson 25, 249. One of the most advantageous promotions I ever received came about through an incident which seemed so insignificant that it appeared to be unimportant. One Saturday afternoon, a lawyer, whose office was on the same floor as that of my employer, came in and asked if I knew where he could get a stenographer to do some work which he was compelled to finish that day. I told him that all of our stenographers had gone to the ball game, and that I would have been gone had he called 5 minutes later, but that I would be very glad to stay and do his work. I could go to a ball game any day, and his work had to be done then. I did the work for him, and when he asked how much he owed me, I replied, "Oh, about $1,000, as long as it is you. If it were for anyone else, I wouldn't charge anything." He smiled and thanked me. Little did I think, when I made that remark, that he would ever pay me $1,000 for that afternoon's work, but he did. 6 months later, after I had entirely forgotten the incident, he called on me again, and asked how much salary I was receiving. When I told him, he informed me that he was ready to pay me that $1,000 which I had laughingly said I would charge him for the work I had performed for him, and he did pay it by giving me a position at $1,000 a year increase in salary. Unconsciously, I had put the law of increasing returns to work in my behalf that afternoon, by giving up the ball game and rendering a service which was obviously rendered out of a desire to be helpful and not for the sake of a monetary consideration. It was not my duty to give up my Saturday afternoon, but it was my privilege. Furthermore, it was a profitable privilege because it yielded me $1,000 in cash and a much more responsible position than the one I had formerly occupied. It was Carol Downs' duty to be on hand until the usual quitting time, but it was his privilege to remain at his post after the other workers had gone, and that privilege, properly exercised, brought him greater responsibilities and a salary that yields him more in a year than he would have made in a lifetime in the position he occupied before he exercised the privilege. I have been thinking for more than 25 years of this privilege of performing more service and better service than that for which we are paid, and my thoughts have led me to the conclusion that a single hour devoted each day to rendering service for which we are not paid can be made to yield bigger returns than we received from the entire remainder of the day during which we are merely performing our duty. E25, Semester 5, we are still in the neighborhood of the most important part of this lesson. Therefore, think and assimilate as you pass over these pages. The law of increasing returns is no invention of mine, nor do I lay claim to the discovery of the principle of rendering more service and better service than paid for, as a means of utilizing this law. I merely appropriated them, after many years of careful observation of those forces which enter into the attainment of success, just as you will appropriate them after you understand their significance. You might begin this appropriation process now by trying an experiment which may easily open your eyes and place back of your efforts powers that you did not know you possessed. Let me caution you, however, not to attempt this experiment in the same spirit in which a certain woman experimented with that biblical passage which says something to the effect that if you have faith the size of a grain of mustard, and say to yonder mountain be revealed to some other place, it will be revealed. This woman lived near a high mountain that she could see from her front door, therefore, as she retired that night she commanded the mountain to remove itself to some other place. Next morning, she jumped out of bed, rushed to the door, and looked out, but lo, the mountain was still there. Then she said, just as I had expected, I knew it would be there. I am going to ask you to approach this experiment with full faith that it will mark one of the most important turning points of your entire life. I am going to ask you to make the object of this experiment the removal of a mountain that is standing where your temple of success should stand, but where it never can stand until you have removed the mountain. You may never have noticed the mountain to which I refer, but it is standing there in your way just the same, unless you have already discovered and removed it. And what is this mountain, you ask? It is the feeling that you have been cheated unless you receive material pay for all the service you render. That feeling may be unconsciously expressing itself and destroying the very foundation of your temple of success in scores of ways that you have not observed. In the very lowly bred type of humanity, this feeling usually seeks outward expression in terms something like this: I am not paid to do this, and I'll be blank a bectinkle if I'll do it. You know the type to which reference is made. You have met Lesson 25, 251, with it many times, but you have never found a single person of this type who was successful, and you never will. Success must be attracted through understanding and application of laws which are as immutable as is the law of gravitation. It cannot be driven into the corner and captured as one would capture a wild steer. For this reason you are requested to enter into the following experiment with the object of familiarizing yourself with one of the most important of these laws, namely, the law of increasing returns. The experiment, during the next 6 months, make it your business to render useful service to at least one person every day, for which you neither expect nor accept wanton weaponry pay. Go at this experiment with faith that it will uncover for your use one of the most powerful laws that enter into the achievement of enduring success, and you will not be disappointed. The rendering of this service may take on any one of more than a score of forms. For example, it may be rendered personally, to one or more specific persons, or it may be rendered to your employer in the nature of work that you perform after hours. Again, it may be rendered to entire strangers whom you never expect to see again. It matters not to whom you render this service so long as you render it with willingness and solely for the purpose of benefiting others. If you carry out this experiment in the proper attitude of mind, you will discover that which all others who have become familiar with the law upon which it is based have discovered, namely, faith. You can no where render service without receiving compensation than you can withhold the rendering of it without suffering the loss of reward. Cause and effect, means and ends, seed and fruit, cannot be severed, says Emerson, for the effect already blooms in the cause, the end pre-exists in the means, the fruit in the seed. If you serve an ungrateful master, serve him the more. Put God in your debt. Every stroke shall be repaid. The longer the payment is withholden, the better for you. For compound interest on compound interest is the rate and usage of this exchequer. The law of nature is, do the thing, and you shall have the power, but they who do not the thing have not the power. Men suffer all their life long, under the foolish superstition that they can be cheated, but it is as impossible for a 252 semester avenue man to be cheated by anyone but himself, as for a thing to be and not to be at the same time. There is a third silent party to all our bargains. The nature and soul of things takes on itself the guarantee of fulfillment of every contract, so that honest service cannot come to loss. Before you begin the experiment that you have been requested to undertake, read Emerson's essay, Compensation, for it will go a very long way toward helping you to understand why you are making the experiment. Perhaps you have read Compensation before. Read it again. One of the strange phenomena that you will observe about this essay may be found in the fact that every time you read it you will discover new truths that you did not notice during previous readings. We go through two important periods in this life. One is that period during which we are gathering, classifying, and organizing knowledge, and the other is that period during which we are struggling for recognition. We must first learn something, which requires more effort than most of us are willing to put into the job, but after we have learned much that can be of useful service to others, we are still confronted with the problem of convincing them that we can serve them. One of the most important reasons why we should always be not only ready but willing to render service is the fact that every time we do so, we gain thereby another opportunity to prove to someone that we have ability. We go just one more step toward gaining the necessary recognition that we must all have. Instead of saying to the world, "Show me the color of your money and I will show you what I can do," reverse the rule and say, "Let me show you the color of my service, so that I may take a look at the color of your money if you like my service." Life is but a short span of years at best. Like a candle, we are lighted, flicker for a moment, and then go out. If we were placed here for the purpose of laying up treasures for use in a life that lies beyond the dark shadow of death, may it not be possible that we can best collect these treasures by rendering all the service we can to all the people we can, in a loving spirit of kindness and sympathy? I hope you agree with this philosophy. Here this lesson must end, but it is by no means completed. Where I lay down the chain of thought, it is now your duty to take it up and develop it in your own way and to your own benefit. By the very nature of the subject of this lesson, it can never be finished, for it leads into the heart of all human activities. Its Lesson 25, 253, purpose is to cause you to take the fundamentals upon which it is based and use them as a stimulus that will cause your mind to unfold, thereby releasing the latent forces that are yours. This lesson is not for the purpose of teaching you, but it is intended as a means of causing you to teach yourself one of the great truths of life. It is intended as a source of education, drawing out, developing from within, those forces of mind which are available for your use. When you deliver the best service of which you are capable, striving each time to excel all your previous efforts, you are making use of the highest form of education. Therefore, when you render more service and better service than that for which you are paid, you, more than anyone else, are profiting by the effort. It is only through the delivery of such service that mastery in your chosen field of endeavor can be attained. For this reason, you should make it a part of your definite chief aim to endeavor to surpass all previous records in all that you do. Let this become a part of your daily habits and follow it with the same regularity with which you eat your meals. Make it your business to render more service and better service than that for which you are paid, and long before you realize what has happened, you will find that the world is willingly paying you for more than you do. The compound interest upon compound interest is the rate that you will be paid for such service. Just how this pyramiding of gains takes place is left entirely to you to determine. Now, what are you going to do with that which you have learned from this lesson? And when? And how? And why? This can be of no value to you unless it moves you to adopt and use the knowledge it has brought you. Knowledge becomes power only through organization and use. Do not forget this. You can never become a leader without doing more than you are paid for, and you cannot become successful without developing leadership in your chosen occupation. Semester 6. Wealth is not of necessity a curse, nor poverty a blessing. R.D. Hitchcock. The acquisition of money has always been a simple matter to those who can practice a little discipline and follow a few rules. P.T. Barnum. Lesson 26. How to become a money-gator. Phineas Taylor Barnum was undoubtedly the greatest showman that America has ever seen. If he had not existed, Horatio Alger would have probably invented him as a hero for one of his rags to riches epics. From a truly humble beginning as a grocery clerk, and with only a grammar school education, P.T. Barnum eventually built the largest circus combine in the world, which he billed as the greatest show on earth. Barnum had very definite ideas on success and how to attain it, and he included his practical advice, all of it still valid today, in his autobiography, The Youth of P.T. Barnum, written by himself. Invariably, when he was invited to deliver a speech, he would refer to the rules of success from his book, and as his lecture increased in popularity, he began calling it the art of money-gating. P.T. was wise enough to understand from his own experiences as promoter and politician that there was one subject of which the public never tired Minoy. This lesson is taken from his money speech. Although it was addressed primarily to America's youth, with the purpose of teaching them how to pursue wealth with integrity and character, you are certain to discover, whatever your age may be, much that will help you think clearly about where you are going and how you want to get there. When this full semester has been completed, you will understand the basic principles of accumulating money, even though you realize by now that money alone carries with it no guarantee. 257, 258. Semester 6 of Happiness. You will have also learned much more, especially the powerful truth that principles of success never changes. The most colorful member of our faculty is about to remind you. In the United States, where we have more land than people, it is not at all difficult for persons in good health to make money. In this comparatively new field, there are so many avenues of success open, so many vocations which are not crowded, that any person of either sex who is willing, at least for the time being, to engage in any respectable occupation that offers, may find lucrative employment. Those who really desire to attain an independence have only to set their minds upon it and adopt the proper means, as they do in regard to any other object which they wish to accomplish, and the thing is easily done. But however easy it may be found to make money, I have no doubt many of my hearers will agree it is the most difficult thing in the world to keep it. The road to wealth is, as Benjamin Franklin truly says, as plain as the road to milk. It consists in expending less than we earn. That seems to be a very simple problem. Mr. Mycorb, one of those happy creations of the genial Dickens, puts the case in a strong light when he says that to have an income of £20 per annum and spend £20 and sixpence is to be the most miserable of men, whereas to have an income of only £20 and spend but £19 and sixpence is to be the happiest of mortals. Many of my hearers may say, we understand this is economy, and we know economy is wealth. We know we can eat our cake and keep it also. Yet I beg to say that perhaps more cases of failure arise from mistakes on this point than almost any other. The fact is, many people think they understand economy when they really do not. True economy consists in always making the income exceed the outgo. Wear the old clothes a little longer if necessary, dispense with the new pair of gloves, mend the old dress, live on plainer food if need be, so that under all circumstances, unless some unforeseen accident occurs, there will be a margin in favor of the income. A penny here and a dollar there, placed at interest, goes on accumulating, and in this way the desired result is attained. It requires some training, perhaps, to accomplish this economy. Lesson 26, 259, but when once used to it, you will find there is more satisfaction in rational saving than in irrational spending. Here is a recipe which I recommend. I have found it to work an excellent cure for extravagance, and especially for mistaken economy. When you find that you have no surplus at the end of the year, and yet have a good income, I advise you to take a few sheets of paper and form them into a book and mark down every item of expenditure. Post it every day or week into columns, one headed necessaries or even comforts, and the other headed luxuries, and you will find that the latter column will be double, treble, and frequently 10 times greater than the former. The real comforts of life cost but a small portion of what most of us can earn. Dr. Franklin says, it is the eyes of others and not our own eyes which ruin us. All the world were blind except myself. I should not care for fine clothes or furniture. It is the fear of what Mrs. Grundy may say that keeps the noses of many worthy families to the grindstone. In America, many persons like to repeat we are all free and equal, but it is a great mistake in more senses than one. That we are born free and equal is a glorious truth in one sense, yet we are not all born equally rich, and we never shall be. One may say, there is a man who has an income of $50,000 per annum, while I have but $1,000. I knew that fellow when he was poor like myself. Now he is rich and thinks he is better than I am. I will show him that I am as good as he is. I will go and buy a horse and buggy. No, I cannot do that, but I will go and hire one and ride this afternoon on the same road that he does, and thus prove to him that I am as good as he is. My friend, you need not take that trouble. You can easily prove that you are as good as he is. You have only to behave as well as he does, but you cannot make anybody believe that you are as rich as he is. Besides, if you put on these airs and waste your time and spend your money, your poor wife will be obliged to scrub her fingers off at home and buy her tea 2 ounces at a time, and everything else in proportion, in order that you may keep up appearances, and after all deceive nobody. Men and women accustomed to gratify every woman's caprice will find it hard at first to cut down their various unnecessary expenses, and will feel it a great self-denial to live in a smaller house than they have been accustomed to, with less expensive furniture, less company, less costly clothing, fewer servants, a less number of balls, parties, theater goods, carriage rings, pleasure excursions, cigar smokings, lickmorniches, and other extravagaances, but, after all, if they will try the plan of laying by a nest, egg, or in other words a small sum of money, at interest or 26. Semester 6, judiciously invested in land, they will be surprised at the pleasure to be derived from constantly adding to their little pile as well as from all the economical habits which are engendered by this course. The old suit of clothes, and the old bonnet and dress, will answer for another season. The croton or spring water will taste better than champagne. A cold bath and a brisk walk will prove more exhilarating than a ride in the finest coach. A social chat, and evenings reading in the family circle, or an hour's play of hunt, the slipper and blind man's buff, will be far more pleasant than a 50 or a 5 a funeral party, when the reflection on the difference in cost is indulged in by those who begin to know the pleasures of saving. Thousands of men are kept poor, add tens of thousands are made so after they have acquired quite sufficient to support them well through life, in consequence of laying their plans of living onto broad a platform. Some families expend $20,000 per annum, and some much more, and would scarcely know how to live unless, while others secure lower, solid enjoyment frequently on a 20th part of that amount. Prosperity is a more severe ordeal than adversity, especially pseudopranstoriet. Easy come, easy go, is an old and true proverb. A spirit of pride and vanity, when permitted to have full sway, is the undying cankerworm which gnaws the very vitals of a man's worldly possessions, let them be small or great, hundreds or millions. Many persons, as they begin to prosper immediately, expand their ideas and commence expending for luxuries, until in a short time their expenses swallow up their income, and they become ruined in their ridiculous attempts to keep up appearances and make a sensation. I know a gentleman of fortune who says that when he first began to prosper, his wife would have a new and elegant sofa. That sofa, he says, cost me $30,000. When the sofa reached the house, it was found necessary to get chairs to match, then sideboards, carpets, and tables to correspond with them, and so on through the entire stock of furniture. When at last it was found that the house itself was quite too small and old-fashioned for furniture, and a new one was built to correspond with the new